In the very beginning, when not a single outline existed, nor the slightest sound, when the cosmic space was shrouded in impenetrable darkness and absolute emptiness, the Creator spoke words that changed everything. Let there be light. And in that instant, a bright ray pierced the darkness, marking the dawn of a new era. Divine will separated the emerging light and the enveloping darkness, naming the light part day and the dark part night. Thus ended the first period of creation, the first step in transforming formlessness into harmony. In the second period, the Creator formed the celestial vault, the vast expanse that stretches above the earth. The Creator proclaimed, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, and let it separate water from water." And by the Creator's word, the sky was formed, separating the watery expanses of the earth and the waters that float in the heavens. On the third day, the Creator continued the formation of the world. The Creator said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it happened as it was foreordained. The waters rushed into their designated boundaries, forming seas and oceans. And from beneath the water rose solid ground. The Creator called the dry ground earth, and the gathered waters seas. Then the Creator turned to the earth. "Let the earth bring forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit according to their kind, with seed in them, on the earth." And the earth, obeying the command, was covered with a carpet of emerald greenery, filled with herbs and trees crowned with luscious fruits. On the fourth day, the Creator made the celestial bodies, intended to illuminate the earth and govern the passage of time. The Creator created two great lights, the greater light, the sun, to govern the day, and the lesser light, the moon, to govern the night. And countless stars were scattered across the firmament, adorning the night sky with their shimmering glow. On the fifth day, the Creator filled the watery depths and heavenly expanses with life. The Creator proclaimed, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." And a great multitude of sea creatures came into being, from giant whales to the tiniest fish, and the heavens were filled with the songs of diverse birds soaring in the heights. On the sixth day, the Creator completed the creation of the animal world. The Creator created wild animals inhabiting forests and steppes, livestock serving humankind, and all creeping things living on the earth. Then the Creator spoke words of particular significance. "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." And the Creator created humankind, male and female, endowing them with a portion of the divine essence. The Creator blessed the people created and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." On the seventh day, having finished all the work, the Creator rested from all the labor. The Creator blessed this day and made it holy, making it a day of rest and reflection on the created world. In the beautiful Garden of Eden, full of abundance and beauty, the Creator placed Adam and Eve so that they might live in harmony with nature and care for the paradise garden. They were allowed to eat the fruit of any tree except for one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The Creator warned them that if they disobeyed and ate the fruit from this tree, they would face certain death. One day, as Eve was walking in the garden, a serpent approached her, the most cunning of all the Creator's creations. The serpent slyly asked Eve, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Eve answered the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." The serpent, seeking to tempt her, retorted, "You will certainly not die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve, succumbing to temptation, looked at the fruit and saw that it was pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. Lured by its beauty and the promise of knowledge, she plucked the fruit and ate it. Then she offered some to Adam, who was with her, and he ate it too. And in that instant their eyes were opened, and they became aware of their nakedness. Overcome with shame, they wove fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves to conceal their nakedness. Soon Adam and Eve heard the voice of the Creator walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and overcome with fear, they hid among the trees. The Creator called to Adam, "Where are you?" Adam, trembling, replied, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. The Creator asked, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? Adam, trying to justify himself, shifted the blame to Eve. The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Then the Creator turned to Eve. What is this you have done? Eve, in turn, blamed the serpent, saying that the serpent deceived me and I ate. Then the Creator pronounced judgment, determining the consequences of their actions. The Creator cursed the serpent, condemning it to crawl on its belly and eat dust all the days of its life, and promised enmity between the serpent and the woman's offspring. To Eve, the Creator said that the Creator would greatly increase her pains in childbearing, that her desire would be for her husband, and he would rule over her. To Adam, the Creator declared that because he had listened to his wife and eaten from the forbidden tree, the ground was cursed because of him. Through painful toil, he would eat food from it all the days of his life. It would produce thorns and thistles for him, and he would eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of his brow he would eat his food until he returned to the ground, since from it he was taken. For dust he was, and to dust he would return. Then the Creator made garments of skin for Adam and Eve and clothed them. And the Creator said, see, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So the Creator banished them from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which they had been taken. After the Creator drove them out, the Creator placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. This brought an end to their carefree life in Eden and marked the beginning of an existence full of toil and hardship beyond the paradise garden. After their exile from Eden, Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain chose the path of a farmer and grew crops from the land, while Abel became a shepherd and cared for flocks of sheep. One day, both brothers decided to bring an offering to the Creator. Cain brought an offering of the fruits of the soil, while Abel selected the choicest lambs from his flock and offered them as a sacrifice. The Creator looked with favor on Abel's offering, but rejected Cain's offering. This deeply saddened and angered Cain, who pondered long and hard why his gift had not been accepted. He felt unfairly wronged and experienced burning envy toward his brother. Cain saw the Creator's favor toward Abel, and this only intensified his anger. Envy gradually turned into rage, and dark thoughts of getting rid of his brother took root in his heart. The Creator, seeing that Cain was consumed by malice, warned him, why are you angry? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. But Cain did not heed the Creator's words. He invited Abel into the field under the pretense of a peaceful conversation. When they were far from prying eyes, Cain, consumed by hatred, attacked his brother and took his life. This became the first murder in human history, a tragic act of fratricide that overshadowed the beginning of human civilization. The Creator asked Cain, where is your brother Abel? Cain, trying to conceal his terrible deed, replied, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? The Creator proclaimed, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Cain, overcome with horror, exclaimed, my punishment is more than I can bear. Anyone who finds me will kill me. The Creator reassured Cain, saying, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Creator put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Creator's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. There he built a city and named it after his son Enoch. Thus ended the tragic story of Cain and Abel, which vividly demonstrates the terrible consequences to which envy and anger can lead, but also testifies to the Creator's unchanging care for the creations, even when they make the gravest mistakes. After the tragedy with Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve continued their earthly journey, and they had a third son named Seth. Seth became the ancestor of numerous generations. The list of Adam's descendants is vast, and among them, one personality stands out, deserving special attention. This was Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. the only one who remained faithful to the Creator amid universal corruption. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. In those days, people on earth were mired in malice and cruelty. The Creator saw all this and decided to restore order, cleansing the earth of evil. The Creator revealed the plan to Noah and commanded him to build a huge ship, an ark. The Creator gave Noah detailed instructions regarding the dimensions of the ark, the materials to be used in its construction, and the internal structure. The ark was to be spacious enough to accommodate Noah, his family, and a pair of every kind of animal inhabiting the earth. Noah, trusting the Creator entirely, began building the ark. The surrounding people mocked him, considering him insane, since there were no signs of an impending catastrophe. However, Noah continued to work tirelessly, believing in the words of the Creator. When the ark was ready, the Creator commanded Noah to bring into it his family and a pair of every kind of animal, from huge elephants to tiny birds. After all the inhabitants had taken their places, the Creator shut the door of the ark. And then the flood came. Rain poured down relentlessly for 40 days and 40 nights. The water rose higher and higher, engulfing the land and destroying all living things that were not aboard the ark. The water covered even the tallest mountain peaks. The ark, lifted by the raging waters, floated on the surface, while Noah, his family, and the animals remained safe inside. After many days, the rain ceased, and the water gradually began to recede. Noah released a dove to see if any dry land had appeared. The dove returned, carrying a fresh olive branch in its beak, a sure sign that the water had retreated and the earth was once again exposed. When the land was completely dry, the Creator commanded Noah to leave the ark. Noah, his family, and all the animals disembarked. Noah built an altar and offered a burnt offering to the Creator in gratitude for their salvation. The Creator promised Noah that he would never again send a flood to destroy all life on earth. As a sign of this covenant, the Creator gave humanity the rainbow. He said, "I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh." So Noah and his descendants began a new life on the cleansed earth. Through his unwavering faith and unconditional obedience to the Creator, Noah showed that even in the most difficult times, it is essential to maintain faith and follow divine guidance. After Noah and his family were saved from the flood, their descendants began to repopulate the earth. At that time, everyone spoke the same language and understood each other easily. Inspired by their common language and sense of unity, they conceived a plan to build a city and a tall tower whose summit would reach the heavens. Their primary goal was to glorify themselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. The people settled on a plain in the land of Shinar in Mesopotamia. They began making bricks and firing them in kilns, using them instead of stones, and using tar as mortar. Their ambition was to build a city with a monumental tower that would become a visible symbol of their power and cohesion. The construction of the tower had not only practical but also deep symbolic undertones. The people sought to demonstrate their might and unbreakable unity. They said, "Let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The Creator, observing their activities, realized that their pride and desire for self-glorification could lead to even more serious problems. He decided to intervene to avert the looming threat. The Creator said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." To thwart their plans, the Creator decided to confuse their languages so that people could no longer understand each other. As a result, they lost the ability to continue working together. In an instant, chaos reigned at the construction site. People spoke in different languages, not understanding what their fellows were saying. The workers could no longer continue building because they could not explain to each other what needed to be done next. After the Creator confused their languages, the people scattered across the earth. The city and tower remained unfinished, never reaching their intended height. The place was named Babel, which means confusion, because it was there that the Creator confused the language of all the earth. The story of the Tower of Babel teaches us that pride and the desire for self-glorification can lead to disunity and chaos. People should remember their humility and strive for unity based on mutual understanding and respect, rather than pride and vanity. Thus, through the Creator's intervention, people dispersed across the earth, and each nation found its place in language. This story explains why there is such a diversity of languages and cultures in the modern world. After people attempted to build the Tower of Babel, and the Creator scattered them across the earth, dividing them by language, it was time for new paths and new people, chosen by the Creator for great accomplishments. One such person was Abraham, who lived in the city of Ur of the Chaldees. Abraham was a descendant of Noah and came from the lineage of Shem. He was known for his righteousness and unwavering faith in the Creator. One day the Creator spoke to Abraham and commanded him to leave his homeland, his people, and his father's house, and go to a land that he would show him. The Creator promised Abraham that he would make him a great nation, bless him and make his name great, and that he would be a blessing to all nations of the earth. Without hesitation, Abraham showed obedience to the Creator, taking with him his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all his possessions, and set out on a journey driven by faith and hope in the fulfillment of divine promises. Abraham and his family traveled to the land of Canaan. Upon arriving there, the Creator appeared to Abraham again and confirmed his promise, saying that this land would belong to his descendants. In gratitude and worship, Abraham built an altar there to the Creator. However, shortly thereafter, a severe famine struck the land, and Abraham had to go to Egypt to escape starvation. In Egypt, Abraham, fearing for his life because of Sarah's extraordinary beauty, supposed that the Egyptians might kill him to take her. Therefore, he asked Sarah to present herself as his sister. The Pharaoh's officials, struck by Sarah's beauty, took her into the Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh, enchanted by Sarah, paid Abraham all kinds of attention and showered him with generous gifts. However, the Creator inflicted severe plagues on Pharaoh and his household. When Pharaoh learned the truth, he angrily sent Abraham and Sarah away, returning all their possessions to them. Returning to Canaan, the herdsmen of Abraham and Lot began to quarrel among themselves, as the land was unable to feed their growing flocks. To avoid further conflict, Abraham suggested that Lot separate. Lot, tempted by the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley, chose them and settled near the city of Sodom, while Abraham remained in Canaan. The Creator again confirmed his promise to Abraham, assuring him that his offspring would be as numerous as the sand of the earth. Years passed, but Abraham still had no children. He began to doubt how the Creator's promise would be fulfilled. The Creator, seeing his doubts, reaffirmed his promise of the birth of a son. In confirmation of this promise, the Creator made a covenant with Abraham. He commanded Abraham to offer as a sacrifice a heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Abraham obeyed the Creator's command, offering sacrifices, cutting the animals in half, and arranging their parts opposite each other. And the Creator, appearing in the form of a smoking furnace and a blazing torch, passed between the severed parts of the animals, thereby confirming the covenant. Sarah, continuing to be barren, suggested that Abraham have a child with her maidservant Hagar. Abraham agreed, and Hagar conceived, which caused tension between Sarah and Hagar eventually brutally ran away. The angel of the Lord found her, told her to return, and promised that her son Ishmael would also become a great nation. Hagar gave birth to Ishmael when Abraham was 86 years old. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Creator appeared to him again and confirmed his promise that Sarah would bear a son, Isaac, and establish the covenant of circumcision with Abraham and his descendants as a sign of belonging to the Creator's people. Despite their advanced age, Abraham and Sarah continued to believe in the Creator's promise. At the time when Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, there were two neighboring cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, which had a bad reputation because of their depravity and cruelty. The inhabitants of these cities committed many atrocities, and the Creator decided to destroy them for their sins. One day, the Creator decided to share his plan with Abraham. Abraham, moved by concern for the people, tried to persuade the Creator not to destroy the cities if there were at least a small number of righteous people in them. He started with 50 righteous people and, gradually reducing the number, went down to 10 asking if the Creator would be merciful to the city for the sake of these people. The Creator agreed not to destroy the cities if there were at least 10 righteous people in them. Meanwhile, 2 angels sent by the Creator arrived in Sodom. Lot, Abraham's nephew who was sitting at the city gate, met them and insistently invited them into his house to protect them from the evil and lawlessness that reigned in the city streets. At night, Lot's house was surrounded by a crowd of sodomite men who demanded that the guests be handed over to them to satisfy their lust. Lot, defending his guests, refused to comply with their demand and even offered them his daughters to save the angels from abuse. Enraged by Lot's refusal, the Sodomites tried to break into his house by force. However, the angels, protecting themselves and their hospitable host, blinded the attackers, depriving them of the ability to find the entrance to the house. The next morning, the angels announced to Lot that the Creator intended to destroy the city for its flagrant sins and ordered him to leave the city as soon as possible with his family. Lot hesitated, unwilling to part with his property and familiar life. So the angels, showing mercy, took him, his wife, and his daughters by the hands and forcibly led them out of the city, strictly ordering them not to look back. As Lot and his family fled Sodom, the Creator rained down fire from brimstone and fire on the city and its surroundings, destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, as well as all their inhabitants and everything in them. Lot and his daughters safely reached refuge in the mountains, but Lot's wife, neglecting the angel's command, could not resist curiosity and look back, and in that instant, she turned into a pillar of salt. Lot and his daughters, left without means of support, found refuge in a cave. There, Lot's daughters, fearing that the whole world had been destroyed and that they were the only surviving women on earth, decided to continue their father's lineage by any means. They plied Lot with wine and took turns having intimate relations with him, conceiving sons from him who later became the progenitors of the Moabite and Ammonite nations. Thus ended the tragic story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which became a clear example of God's wrath and severe punishment for sins, as well as the mercy shown to the righteous who were spared from destruction. Abraham and his wife Sarah continued to live in the land of Canaan, following the paths of the Creator, but their lives were overshadowed by one great sorrow. They had no children. They had reached a very advanced age. Abraham was about 100 years old and Sarah was about 90. Sarah had long lost all hope of motherhood, and her heart was filled with deep sadness. One day the Creator spoke to Abraham again and reaffirmed his promise, given many years before, that he would have a son, and through that son, he would have countless descendants, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Sarah, who happened to overhear this conversation, laughed to herself because she could not believe that she, so old, could bear a child. But the Creator said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Can I really bear a child now that I am so old? Is anything too wonderful for the Creator? At the appointed time I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son.' As time passed, just as the Creator had promised, Sarah conceived. This was truly a miraculous event. Abraham and Sarah could not believe their good fortune. And a year later, at the appointed time, Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, which means laughter, because Sarah had first laughed in disbelief and now from boundless joy. Little Isaac grew into a healthy and cheerful boy. Abraham and Sarah were endlessly happy and immensely grateful to the Creator for this miracle. They cared for him and loved him more than anything in the world. Isaac became living proof that the Creator always fulfills his promises, even when it seems utterly impossible. Isaac's story teaches us that faith and hope are capable of creating real miracles. Even in the most difficult and hopeless situations, it is necessary to trust the Creator's plan and believe that He knows what He is doing, because nothing is impossible for the Creator. Abraham and Sarah lived in the land of Canaan, caring for their long-awaited son Isaac. He was the light of their lives, their hope, and the heir to God's promises. Isaac grew into an obedient and loving son, and his parents couldn't have been prouder of him. But one day the Creator decided to test Abraham's faith. He called out to him, saying, "Abraham!" And he replied, "Here I am." Then the Creator said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." Abraham was shaken to the core. The Creator was asking him to sacrifice Isaac, his only son, whom he had waited so long for. How could this be? How could the Creator who had given him this miraculous gift now demand such an unthinkable sacrifice? But Abraham did not argue. His faith in the Creator was unwavering, and he knew that the Creator had a plan that he was unable to comprehend. Early in the morning, Abraham took Isaac, 2 servants, and a donkey loaded with wood for the altar. They set out on their journey to the land of Moriah. The journey was long and difficult, but Abraham did not show his torment. On the 3rd day of the journey, Abraham saw the mountain that the Creator had spoken of. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there and worship and come again to you." Abraham took the wood and laid it on Isaac's shoulders, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. Isaac, suspecting nothing, asked, "My father, here are the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham replied, "God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." And they went on together. When they came to the place that had been pointed out to him, Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood. Then he bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son, but at that moment the angel of the Creator called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." He responded, "Here I am." And the angel said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear the Creator, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abraham looked up and saw a ram nearby, caught in a thicket by its horns. He took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham called that place Jehovah-Jireh, which means the Creator will provide. The angel of the Creator called to Abraham a second time from heaven, saying, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Creator, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." Abraham and Isaac returned to their servants, and together they went home. This test demonstrated the strength of Abraham's faith and his willingness to submit to the Creator's will, even when it seemed incomprehensible. This story has become a symbol of unwavering faith and unconditional obedience, reminding us of the need to fully trust the Creator, even in the most difficult circumstances. Years passed, and Sarah, Abraham's wife, lived to a ripe old age. She lived to be 127 years old, and she died in Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham grieved deeply for his beloved Sarah and mourned her death for a long time. Seeking to pay her his last respects, Abraham approached the Hittites who inhabited the land, asking for a place to bury her. The Hittites, filled with respect for Abraham and acknowledging him as an outstanding prince among them, generously offered him to choose any place for burial. Abraham chose the cave of Machpelah, located in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar. Abraham offered Ephron a generous payment for the field and the cave. Ephron, being courteous, initially refused to accept the money, but Abraham persisted. He weighed out for Ephron 400 shekels of silver, and so the field and the cave became the property of Abraham. There he buried Sarah with great love and deep reverence. After Sarah's death, Abraham began to think about the future of his son Isaac. He wanted to find him a worthy wife from his own kin, not from the Canaanites among whom they lived. So he called his faithful servant, Eliezer, and entrusted him with a responsible mission. Abraham commanded Eliezer to go to his native land and find a wife for Isaac, who would share their faith and values. Eliezer, being a faithful and wise servant, took 10 camels, laden with generous gifts, and set off for the city of Nahor, where Abraham's brother lived. He offered a prayer to the Creator for help in his difficult quest, asking to show him a sure sign. When he asked a young woman for water, she would not only give him a drink, but also offer water for his thirsty camels. In this way, he would be able to recognize the one whom the Creator had destined for Isaac. When Eliezer arrived at the well outside the city, he saw a beautiful young woman named Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor. He asked her for a little water from her jar, and she not only gave him a drink, but also readily watered all his camels. This was the very sign he had been waiting for. Eliezer, filled with joy, gave her gold jewelry and inquired about her family. Upon learning that she belonged to the lineage of Abraham, he thanked the Creator for showing him the right way. Eliezer went to the house of Bethuel and told them in detail about his mission. Rebekah's family, including her brother Laban, listened to him with due attention and respect and agreed to the marriage. Rebekah, captivated by Eliezer's story, also expressed her consent to go with him to a distant land to become Isaac's wife. They gathered for the long journey, and soon the caravan returned to Abraham. Isaac, who was still mourning his mother, found solace in Rebekah. They met in the field where Isaac loved to seclude himself for prayer and reflection. When he saw the approaching caravan, his heart beat faster. Rebekah, noticing Isaac, got off her camel and asked Eliezer, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" Upon learning that it was her future husband, she covered her face with a veil out of modesty and respect. Isaac brought Rebekah into the tent of his mother Sarah, and she became his wife. He loved her, and she became his comfort after his mother's death. Thus, one chapter of Abraham's life came to an end, and a new one began, filled with hope and love. Abraham lived a long and full life. After Sarah's death, he took a new wife named Keturah, and they had sons, Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Abraham, showing concern for Isaac's future, gave him all his possessions, and to the sons of Keturah he presented generous gifts and sent them eastward, to distant lands, to avoid possible disagreements and conflicts. Abraham happily watched as his son Isaac found love and comfort in Rebekah, and this filled his heart with happiness. He continued to live among his people, enjoying well-deserved respect and authority. His wisdom and unwavering faith served as a source of inspiration for many. When Abraham was 175 years old, he felt the approach of the end of his earthly journey. He had lived a life filled with faith in the Creator, and the Creator had generously rewarded him with offspring, promising that his children would become a great nation. Abraham died at a good old age, full of years, and was gathered to his people. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, next to his beloved wife Sarah. This place had already become a family tomb, symbolizing the unbreakable connection between generations. After Abraham's death, the Creator blessed Isaac, who lived near the well of Lahairoi. Isaac continued his father's work, sacredly keeping the covenant with the Creator and ruling his people with the same wisdom and unwavering faith. Abraham left behind a rich legacy of faith and obedience to the Creator. His life, full of trials and blessings, became an example for many generations. He was not just a patriarch, but also a symbol of courage and devotion, inspiring people to follow the covenant with the Creator and to trust His promises. Thus ended the earthly journey of Abraham, a man who, through all trials and joys, carried faith in the Creator and left behind a great story on which the destinies of his descendants were founded. After Abraham's death, his son Isaac became the head of the household. He continued to live in the land of Canaan, but soon faced unfavorable circumstances. A severe famine struck Canaan, and Isaac realized he needed to find a place where his family could survive the difficult times. He decided to relocate to Gerar, the land of the Philistines, hoping to find sustenance and favorable living conditions there. Gerar was located near Canaan and was known for its fertile lands and favorable climate. When Isaac and his family arrived in Gerar, the Creator appeared to him. The Creator said to Isaac, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. I will be with you, I will bless you, and I will give to you and to your descendants all these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham." Isaac heeded the Creator's command and decided to stay in Gerar, relying on his protection and blessing. Isaac well remembered how his father Abraham had also been forced to relocate and face dangers in his time. He knew that the local residents, attracted by the beauty of his wife Rebekah, might try to kill him in order to take her. Therefore, following Abraham's example, Isaac decided to tell everyone that Rebekah was his sister, not his wife. He hoped that such a ruse would help them avoid unwanted trouble. For a time, all went well, but one day Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, accidentally saw Isaac and Rebekah displaying affection for each other. He noticed that their relationship was too close for a brother and sister. Abimelech, astonished by the revealed deception, summoned Isaac to him and angrily asked him, "Why did you say Rebekah was your sister? She is your wife." Isaac confessed that he had lied, fearing for his life. Abimelech, angered by the deceit and the exclaimed, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." Then he issued an order forbidding anyone to harm Isaac and Rebekah, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." Isaac, having apologized, remained in Gerar under the protection of the king's decree. Isaac engaged in farming and animal husbandry, and the Creator blessed his labors, granting abundant harvests and livestock. With each passing year, his herds grew, and his food supplies steadily increased. Soon he became a very wealthy and influential man. However, his prosperity aroused envy among the local residents. The Philistines, not understanding why Isaac was so successful, began to harm him in every way, filling in the wells that Abraham's servants had once dug. These wells were vital for providing water for his flocks and irrigating his fields. The malicious actions of the Philistines caused Isaac much trouble and made it difficult to manage his household. King Abimelech, seeing how Isaac was becoming increasingly wealthy and powerful, began to fear. He suspected that Isaac might pose a threat to his authority and decided to ask him to leave Gerar. Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us. You have become much mightier than we." Isaac, not wanting to start a conflict, gathered his family, servants, and livestock and moved to the valley of Gerar. There Isaac again began to dig the old wells that his father Abraham had once dug. He gave them their former names, but the local shepherds again began to quarrel with his servants, claiming that the water in these wells belonged to them. Isaac named the first well Esek, which means contention, and the second Sitnah, which means enmity. Finally, Isaac dug a third well, and this time no one disputed his rights. He named it Rehoboth, meaning room, and said, "Now the Creator has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." After that, Isaac went to Beersheba. That night, the Creator appeared to him and reaffirmed his promise to bless him and multiply his descendants for the sake of Abraham. Isaac built an altar there, called upon the name of the Creator, and pitched his tent. His servants dug another well, providing ample water for his flocks. Meanwhile, Abimelech arrived at Isaac's camp from Gerar, accompanied by his friends. Isaac, surprised by their visit, asked, "Why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have driven me away from you?" Abimelech replied that he saw that the Creator was blessing Isaac in all his endeavors, and therefore he proposed making a peace treaty with him. They swore an oath of friendship and loyalty to each other and held a lavish feast. The next day Isaac sent them away in peace. On that very day, Isaac's servants reported to him that they had found water in a new well. He called it Shibah, meaning oath, and the city was named Beersheba, meaning well of the oath. Isaac and Rebekah were the parents of two twin sons, Esau and Jacob. When Esau reached the age of 40, he took 2 Hittite women as wives, which caused deep distress to Isaac and Rebekah. Their family difficulties and the challenging relationships between their children became significant events in their lives. Thus Isaac lived out his days, continuing to follow the faith of his father and strengthening his covenant with the Creator. His life was full of trials and tribulations, but through all the difficulties, the Creator continued to bless him, fulfilling the promises made to Abraham. Jacob and Esau, the sons of Isaac, and Rebekah, born as twins, were destined for rivalry from the very moment they came into the world. Esau, who was born first, had the right of birthright, which meant receiving a double portion of the inheritance and a special blessing from his father. However, despite their familial bonds, their life paths developed in completely different directions. Esau grew up to be a skillful hunter, preferring to spend most of his time outdoors, while Jacob, on the other hand, was more quiet and preferred to stay home, engaging in household tasks. One day Esau, exhausted and famished after a long hunt, returned home and saw that Jacob was cooking a fragrant stew. Esau, consumed by hunger, asked Jacob for some food. Jacob, taking advantage of the situation, offered Esau to exchange the stew for his birthright. Esau, thinking only of how to satisfy his hunger, agreed to the deal without hesitation. Thus Jacob cunningly seized the right of birthright. However, the struggle for primacy did not end there. When Isaac grew old and his eyesight deteriorated significantly, he decided to bless Esau, thereby bestowing upon him the blessing of the firstborn. Rebekah, who loved Jacob more than Esau, overheard the conversation between Isaac and Esau and decided to help her beloved son receive his father's blessing. She devised a cunning plan to dress Jacob in Esau's clothes and wrap his hands and neck with goat skin so that he would appear as hairy as his brother. Jacob, obeying his mother's instructions, brought his father an exquisite dish, prepared according to her recipe, and deceitfully obtained Isaac's blessing. When Esau learned that his blessing had been stolen, he fell into indescribable rage and vowed to kill Jacob, avenging the treachery. Rebekah, having learned of Esau's plot, advised Jacob to flee immediately to her brother Laban in Haran to save his life. Jacob, obeying his mother's advice, set off on a long journey, leaving his home behind. In Haran, Jacob found refuge with Laban and fell passionately in love with his daughter Rachel. He agreed to work for Laban for 7 long years to have the opportunity to marry his beloved. However, Laban deceived Jacob, substituting Rachel with his older daughter Leah. Jacob, having been tricked, was forced to work for another 7 years to finally marry Rachel, winning her heart with his diligence. After many years of working for Laban, Jacob became a wealthy and respected man, and the Creator commanded him to return to the land of his ancestors. Jacob, fearing an encounter with Esau who might still harbor resentment, felt great anxiety. During his return to his homeland, he experienced a fateful spiritual event. He wrestled with a mysterious stranger all night, and this man, who turned out to be an angel, blessed him, changing his name to Israel, which means one who struggles with God. When Jacob and Esau finally met, Jacob, fearing revenge, was prepared for the worst. But Esau showed generosity and forgave his brother, and they reconciled. After that, Jacob settled in the land of Canaan, where his lineage began to grow and prosper. The story of Jacob and Esau is full of intrigue, deception, redemption, and forgiveness. It shows that even in the most complex relationships between brothers, marred by envy and hatred, a path to forgiveness and reconciliation can be found if the will of the Creator intervenes. Jacob had 12 sons, and one of them was Joseph, who enjoyed special love from his father. Joseph was the son of Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, and therefore he received more attention and care than his older brothers. Jacob even gave Joseph a luxurious, multicolored coat, which aroused even greater envy and hatred among his brothers. On top of everything else, Joseph began to have strange dreams, foretelling the future. In one of his dreams, Joseph saw his sheaf of wheat standing upright and firm, while the sheaves of his brothers bowed down before it in deep reverence. In another dream, he saw the bright sun, moon, and 11 stars, which also bowed down before him in a sign of respect and submission. These dreams, unambiguously hinting at his future supremacy over his brothers, caused them even more bitterness and hatred. One day, when Joseph, on his father's instruction, went to visit his brothers, who were tending flocks far from home, they, overcome with envy and malice, conspired to get rid of him once and for all. At first, they wanted to take his life, but then one of the brothers, Judah, suggested a more cunning plan: to sell Joseph to a caravan of merchants heading to distant Egypt. They sold him for 20 silver coins, as if he were a slave, and to conceal their evil deed, dipped his multicolored coat in the blood of a young goat. Returning home, they presented the blood-stained coat to their father Jacob with feigned grief, claiming that Joseph had probably fallen victim to wild beasts. Jacob, heartbroken, plunged into deep sorrow, inconsolably mourning the loss of his beloved son. Meanwhile, Joseph found himself in distant Egypt, where he was acquired as a slave by Potiphar, a high-ranking officer of Pharaoh and the chief of the royal guard. Joseph, being extraordinarily intelligent, hard-working, and capable, quickly earned Potiphar's trust and soon became the manager of his entire household. However, his life took a sharp turn when Potiphar's wife, a seductive and deceitful woman, falsely accused Joseph of attempting to seduce her. Blinded by rage and believing his wife, Potiphar did not investigate the matter and threw Joseph into a dark prison where state criminals were held. Even within the prison walls, Joseph did not lose courage or faith. The Creator did not abandon him, and soon Joseph, through his diligence and talent, became the manager of all the prison's affairs, enjoying respect and trust from the guards. One day, 2 prisoners, former servants of the Pharaoh, approached him. They had been troubled by strange and enigmatic dreams. Joseph, possessing the gift of interpreting dreams, listened attentively to their stories and explained the meaning of their dreams. He predicted that one of the prisoners, the Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, would soon be restored to his position, while the other, the chief baker, would be executed. Joseph's predictions came true exactly as foretold. 2 long years later, the Pharaoh himself had disturbing dreams, the meaning of which no one could understand. The chief cupbearer, remembering Joseph's gift, told the Pharaoh about the talented prisoner capable of interpreting dreams. Intrigued, the Pharaoh ordered Joseph to be brought from the prison immediately. Joseph, brought before the Pharaoh, interpreted his dreams, predicting the arrival of 7 years of abundance, which would be followed by 7 years of severe famine. He also advised the Pharaoh to make a wise decision, to stockpile food during the years of plenty to provide for the country during the famine. The Pharaoh was so impressed with Joseph's wisdom and insight that he decided to elevate him, appointing him the second most powerful man in Egypt, in charge of the entire country and responsible for preparing for the coming disasters. When the years of famine arrived, Joseph skillfully managed the distribution of grain supplies, saving the population from starvation. Soon, news of the grain reserves in Egypt reached the land of Canaan, where Joseph's brothers lived with their father Jacob. Jacob, learning of the opportunity to purchase grain in Egypt, sent his sons, except for Benjamin, to the distant land for food. The brothers appeared before Joseph but did not recognize him, as he was dressed in Egyptian clothing and held a high position. Joseph, recognizing his brothers, decided to test them to see if they had changed and repented of their evil deed. He accused them of espionage and demanded that they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, to Egypt as proof of their innocence. Concerned about Benjamin's fate, the brothers returned home and, despite Jacob's fears, persuaded him to let Benjamin go with them to Egypt. Joseph, seeing Benjamin, whom he had not seen for many years, arranged a lavish feast for the brothers, but secretly ordered his silver cup to be placed in Benjamin's sack to create a reason for a new test. The next morning, as the brothers with Benjamin set out on their way back, Joseph's servants caught up with them and accused them of stealing a valuable cup. The brothers, outraged by the false accusation, returned to Joseph and begged him to spare Benjamin, offering themselves as slaves in his place. Touched by the brothers' sincere remorse and their willingness to sacrifice themselves to save Benjamin, Joseph could no longer hide the truth and revealed himself to them, declaring that he was their brother Joseph. The brothers, shocked and stunned, could not believe their eyes and initially felt fear, realizing the horror of their past misdeed. But Joseph, showing generosity and mercy, comforted them, saying that everything that had happened was part of God's plan, aimed at saving their family from starvation. He persuaded them all, along with their father Jacob, to move to Egypt, where a life of abundance and security awaited them. Jacob and his entire large family relocated to blessed Egypt, where they were greeted with honor by the Pharaoh, who gave them the best land in the region of Goshen for residence and prosperity. Jacob lived in blessed Egypt for another 17 years, surrounded by the care and love of his sons and grandchildren. Before his death, he called his sons and blessed them, foretelling their future. Joseph, despite the suffering and injustice he had endured, forgave his brothers and provided them with everything they needed for life in Egypt. He lived a long and prosperous life, always remembering that all the trials he had faced were part of God's plan, aimed at saving his family and his people. Many years passed since Jacob's family settled in Egypt. Their descendants, the Israelites, multiplied exceedingly and became a numerous and powerful people. A new Pharaoh, who ascended the throne and did not know about Joseph and his merits, began to fear the Israelites, fearing their growing numbers and influence. He decided to take cruel measures to keep them in subjection and prevent a possible rebellion. He turned the Israelites into slaves and forced them to perform hard labor, building cities and pyramids, using their strength and energy for his own selfish purposes. But despite the harsh conditions of slavery and inhuman treatment, the Israelites continued to multiply and grow in number, causing even greater fear in the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh, overcome with fear and despair, issued an even more cruel and inhuman decree. He ordered the killing of all newborn Israelite boys, throwing them into the Nile in order to control the population and prevent the emergence of new generations striving for freedom. In this tragic time, a boy was born whose parents, driven by love and fear of the Pharaoh, hid him from his cruel fate. When it was no longer possible to hide him, the mother, obeying a desperate decision, wove a basket from reeds, smeared it with tar, and placing the baby in it, lowered the basket into the waters of the Nile, relying on God's mercy and hoping that her child would escape imminent death. The Pharaoh's daughter, going down to the river to bathe, noticed a basket floating downstream. She sent a maidservant to retrieve it, and opening the basket, saw a crying baby. The Pharaoh's daughter's heart was touched with pity for the defenseless child, and she decided to take him, adopt him, and raise him as her own son. She named him Moses, which means saved from the water. Moses' mother, thanks to her resourcefulness and cunning, managed to become his wet nurse, hiding her origin and maintaining contact with her son. Thus, Moses grew up in the Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by luxury and receiving an education, but always remembering his roots and that he was an Israelite. When Moses grew up, he witnessed an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite. Unable to bear the injustice and anger, Moses, driven by compassion for his people, stood up for the Israelite and killed the Egyptian, committing an act that forever changed his life. Fearing the Pharaoh's wrath and persecution, Moses was forced to flee into the desert to escape imminent retribution. He found refuge in the land of Midian, where he became a shepherd, married Zipporah, the daughter of the local priest Jethro, and began a new life away from the palace and his people. One day, as Moses was tending sheep at the foot of Mount Horeb, he saw an unusual phenomenon. A bush of thorns was burning with a bright flame, but it was not consumed, remaining intact. Moses, struck by the miracle he saw, approached to examine this extraordinary sight. At that moment, he heard the voice of the Creator, calling him by name. The Creator said that he had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt and decided to save them from slavery and oppression. He chose Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and bring them to the Promised Land. Moses, humble and meek, was overwhelmed and frightened by the mission entrusted to him. He did not believe that he could cope with such a responsible task, given his past and his shortcomings. He told the Creator that he did not speak well and that neither the Israelites nor the Pharaoh would likely listen to him. But the Creator reassured Moses, assuring him of his support and promising that his brother Aaron would speak in his place, explaining his words. The Creator also granted Moses signs to convince the people of Israel and the Pharaoh of the truth of his message. The transformation of the staff into a snake and the sudden affliction of his hand with leprosy, followed by healing. With these signs and unwavering faith in the Creator's support, Moses returned to Egypt to fulfill his great mission. Together with Aaron, they began to convince the Israelites and the Pharaoh that the time had come to release God's people to freedom. Numerous trials and miracles awaited them, but Moses, strengthened by faith, was ready to follow God's call and lead his people to long-awaited freedom. Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt to fulfill God's will and liberate the Israelites from cruel slavery. They appeared before the Pharaoh and delivered God's message to him. "Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness." But the Pharaoh, hardening his heart, did not want to release the Israelites and even made their work even harder, forcing them to independently obtain straw for making bricks. Then the Creator decided to reveal his strength and power through Moses and Aaron to force the stubborn Pharaoh to submit and release the Israelites to freedom. He brought upon Egypt 10 terrible plagues, each of which was more terrible and destructive than the previous one, demonstrating his strength and power. The first plague, water turned into blood. Moses, obeying the Creator's command, struck the waters of the Nile with his staff, and all the water in the river instantly turned into blood. The fish died and the water became unfit for drinking, causing despair and fear among the Egyptians. The second plague, an invasion of frogs. Swarms of frogs crawled out of the rivers and swamps and filled all of Egypt, penetrating into houses, palaces, and even people's bedrooms, creating unbearable living conditions. The Pharaoh, begging for help, asked Moses to pray to the Creator to remove the frogs, promising to release the Israelites. But as soon as the frogs disappeared, he hardened his heart again and refused to keep his word. The third plague, an invasion of gnats. Moses, obeying God's command, struck the ground with his staff, and all the dust turned into swarms of gnats that tormented people and animals, causing unbearable itching and irritation. The fourth plague, an invasion of flies. All of Egypt was inundated with swarms of flies, filling every house and palace, spreading contagion and disease. However, the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, miraculously remained untouched by the flies. The fifth plague, the death of livestock. All the domestic animals of the Egyptians, including horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep, fell ill and died from a terrible disease. But the livestock belonging to the Israelites remained unharmed, as if under special protection. The sixth plague, boils and sores. Moses and Aaron, at the Creator's command, took handfuls of soot from a furnace and threw it into the air before Pharaoh. Instantly, festering boils and sores appeared on people and animals, causing unbearable pain and suffering. The seventh plague, fiery hail. Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and a terrible storm broke out with fiery hail that destroyed crops in the fields, killed people and animals, and devastated all the land of Egypt. Only the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, remained untouched by the elements. The eighth plague, a swarm of locusts. The Creator sent countless swarms of locusts upon Egypt, covering the entire land and devouring all the plants, fruits, and grain that remained after the hail, leaving behind only desolation and famine. Egypt was in despair, but Pharaoh, persisting in his pride, still did not release the Israelites to freedom. The ninth plague, utter darkness. For 3 long days, all of Egypt was plunged into a thick, impenetrable darkness. People could not see each other and dared not leave their homes, gripped by horror and fear. But in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, light continued to shine, presenting a visible miracle. The 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. This was the most terrible and devastating plague to strike Egypt. The Creator declared that on this night, the firstborn in every Egyptian house would die, from the son of Pharaoh sitting on the throne to the firstborn of the female slave in the dungeon, and even the firstborn of the livestock. But he gave the Israelites a special instruction: to slaughter a lamb without blemish and smear its blood on the doorposts of their houses. The angel of death, sent by the Creator, would pass over the houses marked with the blood of the lamb, causing them no harm. Pharaoh, having lost his firstborn and seized by unbearable horror, summoned Moses and Aaron at night and cried out in despair, "Get up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go, and also bless me." Finally, the Israelites gained their long-awaited freedom. They hastily gathered their belongings, took with them the gold and silver that the Egyptians gave them in fear of the Creator's wrath, and set off on their journey, led by the Creator in a pillar of cloud by day and in a pillar of fire by night. The Israelites left Egypt in haste, beginning their long and challenging journey to the Promised Land. Thus ended their long and agonizing period of slavery, and a new chapter began in the history of God's people. After Pharaoh let the Israelites go, they began their exodus from Egypt. The Creator led them through the desert, during the day in a pillar of cloud to show them the way, and at night in a pillar of fire to light their path and enable them to travel both day and night. They were heading toward the Red Sea when suddenly Pharaoh, recovering from his grief and struck by the scale of the loss of labor, changed his mind and decided to bring back his runaway slaves. He gathered his army, consisting of 600 select chariots and all the rest of the Egyptian cavalry, and rushed in pursuit of the Israelites. When the Israelites saw the approaching Egyptians, they were seized with panic and began to murmur against Moses. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." But Moses, filled with faith and courage, replied to them, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Creator will bring you today. The Creator will fight for you. You need only to be still." The Creator commanded Moses to raise his staff over the sea and stretch out his hand. When Moses obeyed, the Creator drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and before the astonished Israelites, a dry path opened up in the middle of the sea. Obeying the Creator's command, they fearlessly walked along the seabed with the water standing like a wall on both sides, as if guarding them from danger. The Egyptians, blinded by rage and a thirst for revenge, rushed in pursuit of the Israelites, but the Creator hindered their progress, slowing down their chariots and throwing them into confusion. When the last of the Israelites had safely crossed to the other side, the Creator commanded Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea again. Moses, fulfilling the command, stretched out his hand, and the waters of the sea, obeying the Creator's will, crashed down upon the Egyptian army, drowning all the warriors and chariots in the raging waves. The Israelites, having witnessed this miracle, were delivered from imminent death and filled with gratitude to the Creator for his protection and mercy. After the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea, the Israelites continued their journey through the desert. Soon the people began to complain about the lack of drinking water. Moses prayed to the Creator, and the Creator pointed him to a tree, which he threw into the bitter waters of the Marah spring, after which the water miraculously turned into sweet and drinkable water. Then the people began to murmur about the lack of food. The Creator, hearing their complaints, sent them manna, a special bread from heaven, which they found on the ground every morning, and quail, which flew into their camp every evening, providing them with food. But the Creator commanded them to gather manna only for one day except on Fridays, when they were to gather a double portion, so that they could observe the Sabbath in peace, testing their faith and obedience. On the way through the waterless desert, the people again faced a severe shortage of water. At Massah and Meribah, the people murmured against Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and our livestock die of thirst?" The Creator, hearing their murmuring, commanded Moses to take his staff and strike the rock in Horeb. When Moses obeyed, water gushed out of the rock, and the people were able to quench their thirst. At Rephidim, the Israelites were attacked by the warlike Amalekite tribe. Moses went up to the top of the hill with the staff of the Creator in his hands, while Joshua led the Israelite army into battle. As long as Moses held his hands raised to the sky, the Israelites prevailed. But when he, tired, lowered his hands, the Amalekites began to push back the Israelites. Aaron and Hur, seeing Moses' weakness, put a stone under him so that he could sit, and they supported his hands until sunset, thanks to which the Israelites won a complete victory over the Amalekites. Moses met again with his father-in-law Jethro, who came to him in the desert with Moses' wife Zipporah and his sons. Jethro, observing how Moses alone was resolving all the disputes and lawsuits of the people, gave him wise advice to appoint judges over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens of people, so that they could handle minor cases, and Moses would only be responsible for the most important and complex issues, consulting with the Creator. Moses followed his father-in-law's advice, which greatly eased his burden. Thus continued the journey of the Israelites through the barren desert, full of trials and miracles, in which the Creator repeatedly demonstrated his strength, care, and mercy toward his people. After a long and grueling journey through the desert, the Israelites finally reached the foot of the sacred Mount Sinai. There the Creator decided to make a covenant with them and give them his law, which would define their future life. Moses went up Mount Sinai, and the Creator spoke to him, saying, "You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." Moses came down from the mountain and conveyed these words to the people of Israel, and all the people unanimously replied, "Everything the Creator has said, we will do." Then the Creator commanded Moses to prepare the people for a great and solemn event. In 3 days, he would descend upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people to speak with them personally, giving them his law. For 3 days, the Israelites prepared for this momentous event. They washed themselves, washed their clothes, and abstained from all worldly things, preparing to meet the Creator. Finally, the 3rd day arrived. Early in the morning, thunder pealed over the mountain, lightning flashed, and a thick cloud enveloped the summit. A loud trumpet blast sounded, and all the people, seized with sacred awe, trembled. Moses led the people out of the camp to the foot of Mount Sinai so that they could hear the Creator's voice. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Creator descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. The sound of the trumpet grew louder and more piercing, increasing the trepidation in the hearts of the people. Moses spoke with the Creator, and the Creator answered him in a thunderous voice, full of power and majesty. The Creator summoned Moses to the top of the mountain and handed him 2 stone tablets, inscribed by the finger of God, on which were written the 10 Commandments, which are the basis of the law. The Creator called the Israelites to worship only him, so that he would be their sole Creator and Lord. He forbade them to worship any other gods, or to make for themselves idols or images of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water below. The worship of idols and serving them was strictly forbidden, for the Creator is jealous and will not tolerate the sharing of his glory with other gods. They were also forbidden to misuse the name of the Creator, requiring respectful and reverent treatment of his holy name. One of the most important commandments was to observe the Sabbath day, dedicating it to the Creator. On the Sabbath, the Israelites were to cease all work and rest, remembering the creation of the world and their deliverance from Egyptian slavery. For 6 days they were allowed to labor and attend to their affairs, but the seventh day was to be dedicated to the Creator as a day of rest and sanctification. Another commandment was to honor one's father and mother, promising long life and prosperity on earth in return. Reverence for parents was seen as an expression of respect for the Creator, who established the institution of family. The commandment, "You shall not murder," forbade the intentional taking of another person's life, for life is sacred and bestowed by the Creator. The commandment, "You shall not commit adultery," forbade any sexual relations outside of marriage, protecting the sanctity of marriage and fidelity between spouses as the foundation of a healthy society. The commandment, "You shall not steal," forbade taking the property of others, emphasizing the importance of honesty, integrity, and respect for another's possessions. The commandment, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor," forbade perjury, slander, and the spreading of false information about another person, highlighting the importance of truthfulness, justice, and protecting one's neighbor's reputation. Finally, the commandment, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house." You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's, forbade envy, greed, and unhealthy desires for the possessions or position of others. This commandment emphasized the importance of inner purity, contentment with what one has, and struggling against sinful thoughts. In addition to the 10 Commandments, the Creator gave Moses many other laws concerning all areas of Israelite life, including matters of justice, mercy, morality, and ritual purity. He taught them how to treat servants, how to resolve disputes and conflicts, how to help the poor and needy, and how to show compassion to foreigners living among them. The Creator also gave them laws about festivals and ceremonies that they were to observe in order to remember their relationship with Him and to celebrate His blessings. Moses descended from Mount Sinai and told the people all the laws and commandments that the Creator had given him. The people, filled with awe, once again unanimously agreed to observe all that the Creator had said, promising to obey His voice and follow His ways. Moses wrote down all the words of the Creator in the Book of the Covenant and erected an altar at the foot of the mountain, setting up 12 stones, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. The next day he offered burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Creator, and taking the blood of the sacrificial animals, sprinkled it on the people, proclaiming, "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Creator has made with you in accordance with all these words." Thus, Moses sealed the covenant between the Creator and the Israelite, consecrating it with blood. Then the Creator called Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel to ascend the mountain, so that they might see His glory and partake in a sacred meal in His presence. And they saw the Creator of Israel, and under His feet there was, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And He did not lay His hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. They saw the Creator and ate and drank, rejoicing in fellowship with Him and confirming the covenant that had been made. After this, the Creator again called Moses to the summit of Mount Sinai to give him the stone tablets of the covenant, on which were inscribed the 10 Commandments, and also to give him detailed instructions regarding the construction of the tabernacle and the order of worship. Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain, communing with the Creator and receiving from Him instructions on how the Israelites should live, worship Him, and build their relationships with one another. Thus, the Creator gave the Israelites His law on Mount Sinai, entering into a special covenant with them and providing them with guidance for a righteous and devout life. When Moses lingered on Mount Sinai, the people of Israel, tired of waiting and gripped by fear, began to murmur and lose faith. They turned to Aaron and demanded that he make them a new god to lead them, for they did not know what had become of Moses. Aaron, yielding to the pressure of the people and wishing to avoid unrest, agreed to fulfill their request and ordered them to collect all the gold jewelry they possessed. From the collected gold, he fashioned a cast statue of a golden calf, a likeness of the Egyptian god Apis. The people, forgetting the Creator who had delivered them from Egyptian slavery, rejoiced and celebrated, offering sacrifices and worshiping this man-made idol. They exclaimed, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." While on Mount Sinai, the Creator saw all that was happening in the Israelite camp, and his anger was kindled against the people. He said to Moses, "Go down at once, for your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them. They have made for themselves a golden calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt.'" Moses, filled with anger and sorrow, descended from Mount Sinai, carrying in his hands the 2 stone tablets of the covenant, on which were inscribed the commandments of God. Seeing the golden calf and the people dancing and rejoicing around it, he could not restrain his anger, and in a fit of rage he smashed the stone tablets at the foot of the mountain. Then he took the golden calf, burned it in the fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it, to show them the utter worthlessness and abomination of their idol. Moses turned to Aaron and asked him, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them?" Aaron, trying to justify his actions, said that the people were hostile and demanded that he make them a god to lead them. And he simply threw the gold into the fire, and out came this calf. Moses, seeing that the people were steeped in sin, stood at the gate of the camp and proclaimed, "Who is on the Creator's side? Come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered around him. Moses commanded the Levites to go through the camp from gate to gate and strike down with the sword all who had worshipped the golden calf, sparing neither brother, nor friend, nor neighbor. On that day, about 3,000 people perished, having preferred an idol to the Creator. The next day, Moses again ascended the mountain to plead with the Creator for mercy on the people and to ask him to forgive their grievous sin. The Creator said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them." The Creator commanded Moses to carve 2 new stone tablets so that he could write on them the same words that were on the first tablets, which Moses had broken. Moses again ascended Mount Sinai and spent 40 days and 40 nights there, neither eating bread nor drinking water. The Creator again inscribed on the tablets the 10 commandments, which are the foundation of his law. The Creator made a new covenant with Moses and the people of Israel, confirming his promises and obligations. He promised to lead them into the land that he had sworn to give to their ancestors, and again commanded them to keep his commandments and not to worship any other gods. Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain in communion with the Creator, and when he came down from the mountain, his face shone with an extraordinary radiance from the glory of God. The people, seeing Moses' radiant face, were afraid to approach him, so Moses put a veil over his face to hide the glory of God from them. He communicated to the Israelites all the commandments and decrees of the Lord, and they promised to obey them and serve him alone. Thus the Creator forgave the people for their grievous sin and restored the covenant with them, reaffirming them as his chosen people and reminding them of the importance of faithfulness, obedience, and worshiping him alone. After the Creator forgave the Israelites for worshiping the golden calf, he gave Moses detailed instructions for building the tabernacle, a sacred portable temple where the Creator would dwell among his people, manifesting his presence and glory. Moses, convening all the Israelites, solemnly announced to them the Creator's commands regarding the construction of the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary where he would manifest his presence among his people. Moses said, "The Creator has commanded us to build a sanctuary. Everyone who is willing and has a generous heart, let him bring a voluntary offering to the Creator: gold, silver, bronze, fabrics, skins, and other necessary materials." The people, moved by love for the Creator and a desire to please him, responded to the call with great joy and zeal. Men and women brought their valuables, jewelry, fabrics, skins, and other materials for the construction of the tabernacle. Some of them voluntarily gave their gold jewelry, symbols of wealth and status, while skilled artisans offered their talents, skills, and knowledge to perform complex tasks. Special attention was given to the making of sacred garments for the priests, who were to perform the service in the tabernacle, as well as the making of all the necessary furnishings and objects: the Ark of the Covenant, the table for the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offering. All these objects were to be made in exact accordance with the Creator's instructions, so that the service in the tabernacle would be pleasing to him. Moses, fulfilling God's will, appointed Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and Aholiab from the tribe of Dan as the chief craftsman responsible for directing all the work on the construction of the tabernacle and the making of its furnishings. The Creator filled them with wisdom, understanding, and all kinds of skill so that they could teach others and direct all the work related to the construction of the tabernacle. They, in turn, directed other craftsmen, creating amazing works of art, making gold ornaments, carving precious stones, skillfully weaving fabrics, and sewing garments for the priests. The tabernacle consisted of several parts, each of which had its own special purpose. At the very center of the tabernacle was the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place where the Ark of the Covenant was to stand, a symbol of the Creator's presence among his people. The Ark was made of acacia wood and covered with pure gold. On top of the Ark were 2 golden cherubim with outstretched wings, guarding the Ark and symbolizing God's glory. Inside the Ark were kept the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod that had budded, and a golden jar of manna, reminders of God's faithfulness to his covenant and his miraculous care for his people. In front of the Holy of Holies was the holy place, where the golden lampstand, the table for the bread of the presence, and the altar of incense were located. Here the priests performed daily service to the Creator, lighting the lampstand, arranging the bread of the presence, and burning incense. The tabernacle was surrounded by a court where the altar for burnt offerings and the bronze basin were located. In the court, animal sacrifices were offered for the sins of the people, and the priests washed themselves before entering the sanctuary. The tabernacle and all its accessories were carefully and skillfully made according to the Creator's precise instructions, so that everything was done according to his will and for his glory. When all the work on constructing the tabernacle and making all its accessories was completed, Moses carefully inspected every part of the tabernacle, making sure that everything was done in exact accordance with God's plan. He blessed the people for their diligence, generosity, devotion, and craftsmanship, glorifying the Creator for their obedience. On the first day of the first month of the second year after the Israelites left Egypt, the tabernacle was erected and solemnly dedicated. Moses anointed the tabernacle and all its accessories with sacred oil, setting them apart for service to the Creator. The priests, dressed in sacred garments, began their services, burning incense, offering sacrifices, and praying for the people. When the tabernacle was completely finished, the cloud of the Lord covered it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, so that Moses could not enter it. This was a clear sign that the Creator had accepted their work and would dwell among his people, manifesting his presence and glory. From then on, the cloud of the Lord stood over the tabernacle during the day, and at night it took the form of a pillar of fire, illuminating the way for the Israelites. When the cloud lifted from over the tabernacle, the Israelites moved on and followed it, knowing that the Creator was leading them into the promised land. When the cloud stopped, they camped and rested, awaiting further instructions from the Creator. Thus the Creator led his people through the waterless desert, protecting, guiding, and providing them with everything they needed for life. After the death of Moses, the Creator chose Joshua as the new leader of the Israelites to continue the work of Moses and lead the people into the land of Canaan, which the Creator had promised to their ancestors. The Creator strengthened Joshua, saying, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Creator, your God, is with you wherever you go." Joshua, having received the divine calling, began to prepare the people to cross the raging Jordan River, which blocked their way to the promised land. He sent 2 brave spies into the well-fortified city of Jericho to secretly scout out the situation and learn about the strength of the enemies. The spies, having entered the city, stayed in the house of a woman named Rahab, who was a prostitute. Rahab, having heard about the miracles that the Creator had performed for the Israelites, believed in his power and might, and, risking her life, hid the spies from the pursuers sent by the king of Jericho. She helped them escape from the city, lowering them by a rope from a window located in the city wall. In gratitude for her help, the spies swore to Rahab that when the city was taken, she and her family would be spared and their lives saved. They told her to tie a scarlet rope to the window so that their warriors could recognize her house and not cause harm. When the time came to cross the Jordan, the Creator performed a new miracle, similar to the crossing of the Red Sea. The priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant entered the river, and as soon as their feet touched the waters of the Jordan parted, and the people crossed unhindered to the other side on dry ground. This event, once again reminding the Israelites of the Creator's power and faithfulness, strengthened their faith and courage. In memory of this miraculous crossing, Joshua ordered 12 stones to be set up at the crossing place, symbolizing the 12 tribes of Israel. The first city that the Israelites had to conquer was Jericho, an impregnable fortress surrounded by mighty walls. The Creator, wanting to test the faith and obedience of his people, gave Joshua unusual instructions for taking the city. For 6 days, the warriors were to march around the city once a day, and the priests were to blow trumpets. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times, and when the trumpets sounded and the people shouted loudly, the walls of Jericho would fall by themselves. The Israelites, obeying God's command, carried out all the instructions exactly. On the 7th day, after marching around the city 7 times, the priest blew the trumpets, and the people gave a loud, victorious shout. At that very moment, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites, bursting into the city, captured it, destroyed all the inhabitants except Rahab and her family, and dedicated all the spoils to the Creator. After the victory at Jericho, the Israelites headed for the small town of Ai. However, this time they suffered a crushing defeat, suffering heavy losses. The cause of the defeat was the sin of Achan, one of the Israelites, who, contrary to God's command, took for himself some of the devoted things from Jericho, thereby breaking the covenant with the Creator. When Achan's sin was revealed, he was severely punished, and only after that did the Creator's anger turn away from the Israelites. After Achan was put to death, the Israelites went up to Ai again, and this time they were victorious, destroying all the inhabitants and capturing the city. The capture of Ai marked the beginning of the full-scale conquest of Canaan, which lasted for several years. Joshua led the Israelite army from city to city, defeating numerous kings and their armies, reclaiming the promised land. He skillfully used tactics of surprise attacks, carefully planned military operations, and forged strategic alliances with local tribes. One such alliance was made with the cunning Gibeonites, who, deceiving the Israelites, made a peace treaty with them, thus avoiding destruction. One of the most amazing events during the conquest of Canaan was the battle at Gibeon, when 5 Canaanite kings united against the Israelites. In the midst of the battle, Joshua called out to the Creator, asking him to prolong the day so that the Israelites could win a complete victory over their enemies. The Creator, hearing the prayer of his faithful servant, performed a miracle, stopping the sun and moon until the Israelites had defeated all their enemies. This amazing miracle helped the Israelites win a decisive victory, destroying the army of the 5 kings and capturing Gibeon. After the victory at Gibeon, Joshua continued the conquest of the southern and northern parts of Canaan, conquering one city after another. With each battle, the Israelites increasingly strengthened their position in the land that the Creator had promised to their ancestors. Fulfilling his promise, the Creator was faithful to his word and granted them victory after victory, driving out the Canaanites and giving their land as an inheritance to his people. After the main conquests were completed, it was time to divide the land among the 12 tribes of Israel, so that each family could receive their plot for living and cultivating the land. Joshua, having gathered all the elders, tribal leaders, and chiefs of Israel, announced to them that the time had come to divide the conquered land, as the Creator had commanded through Moses. This was a responsible task, for each clan had to receive its allotment in order to live and prosper. Joshua, following the divine instruction, cast lots, determining the boundaries of the territories that each tribe was to receive, fulfilling God's will and ensuring fairness in the distribution of the land. It was important to fairly distribute the land among the tribes to ensure that everyone had enough land and resources for life and prosperity. First, Joshua divided the land that was east of the Jordan River, intended for the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. These lands had already been conquered by Moses, and now it was time to officially assign them to these tribes. Then Joshua proceeded to divide the land located west of the Jordan River. The tribe of Judah was allotted a large part of the southern lands, known for their fertile soil and rich resources. The tribe of Ephraim and the other half of the tribe of Manasseh received lands in the central part of Canaan, distinguished by hilly terrain and fertile valleys. The northern lands were divided between the tribes of Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and other tribes that received their plots of land according to the lot. Thus, each tribe of Israel received its allotment of land, and everyone was satisfied with the fair distribution. However, one important issue remained to be resolved: to allocate cities for the Levites, the tribe that did not receive a separate territory since it was dedicated to serving the Creator. The Levites, who served as priests and ministers in the tabernacle, received special cities located in the territory of all the tribes of Israel so that they could live among the people and teach them the law of God. In addition, cities of refuge were designated for those who accidentally killed a person. These cities, scattered throughout the land, provided refuge and protection from blood vengeance, as well as the opportunity to stand trial and prove their innocence. When the distribution of the land was completed, Joshua, gathering all the people of Israel in the city of Shechem, reminded them of the great deeds that the Creator had done for them, leading them out of Egyptian slavery and granting them victory over their enemies in the land of Canaan. Joshua urged the people to remain faithful to the Creator, to keep His commandments, and not to forget His mercy and love. The people, inspired by Joshua's words, vowed to serve only the Creator and made a new covenant with Him, reaffirming their loyalty and devotion. After these events, Joshua, having lived a long and righteous life, died at the age of 110. He was buried on his plot of land in the mountainous region of Ephraim, leaving behind a rich legacy of faith and courage. The people of Israel continued to live in the land that the Creator had promised to their ancestors, remembering their obligations and faithfulness to the Creator. Thus ended the era of conquest, and a new chapter began in the history of the Israelite people. Life in the land of Canaan, where they could build their homes, cultivate the land, raise children, and honor the Creator, who was with them at every step of their difficult and glorious journey. After the death of Joshua, there came a period when the Israelites had no single leader, and each tribe was governed by its own elders. This period is known in the history of Israel as the era of the Judges. Throughout this era, the people of Israel experienced recurring cycles of turning away from the Creator, facing consequences, repenting, and being saved. Each cycle began with the Israelites forgetting the Creator and succumbing to temptations, worshiping idols and false gods of neighboring nations. This departure from faith led to the Creator withdrawing protection, leaving them vulnerable to oppression, subjugation, and plunder by their enemies, causing suffering and hardship. In desperation and anguish, the people would cry out to the Creator, confessing their sins and pleading for help. Then, in an act of mercy, the Creator would send a judge, a charismatic leader endowed with exceptional strength and wisdom, who would deliver the people from their enemies and guide them back to true faith and worship. These judges were chosen by the Creator and gifted with unique abilities and wisdom to effectively lead the people of Israel through turbulent times. One of the earliest and most renowned judges was Gideon, a descendant of Manasseh. When the Israelites, having once again strayed from the Creator, found themselves under the oppression of the Midianites, the Creator appeared to Gideon as he was threshing wheat in a winepress to hide from the enemy, and told him that he was chosen to be Israel's savior. Though Gideon initially doubted his abilities, the Creator strengthened him and granted him victory over the vastly superior forces of the Midianites, liberating the Israelites from their oppressors. Another notable judge was Deborah, the only woman to hold the position. Inspired by the Creator, Deborah was not only a prophetess but also a wise leader, and her counsel was highly valued. Under her guidance, the Israelites achieved a decisive victory over Gibeon, the Canaanite king, freeing themselves from his tyranny and enjoying a long period of peace lasting 40 years. Samson, known for his incredible strength, was another prominent judge selected by the Creator to protect Israel from the Philistines. Despite his personal flaws and failings, Samson fulfilled his mission, inflicting a series of devastating defeats on the Philistines and liberating the Israelites from their oppression. However, despite all the victories and periods of relative peace, the Israelites, unfortunately, repeatedly forgot their Creator and returned to their old pagan ways, worshiping idols and violating His commandments. And each time the Creator, saddened by their unfaithfulness, allowed their enemies to oppress them, urging them to recognize their mistakes and return to Him with sincere repentance. This tragic cycle, characterized by apostasy, punishment, repentance, and deliverance, recurred numerous times throughout the period of the Judges, demonstrating the fickleness of human nature and the need for constant devotion to the Creator. Eventually, the last judge, Samuel, became a bridge between the era of the Judges and the period of the monarchy, playing a pivotal role in the transition to a new phase in Israel's history. Samuel, an outstanding prophet and spiritual leader of his time, recognized the need for a strong centralized authority to unite the people and protect them from external threats. Influenced by Samuel and in response to their request, the Israelites asked the Creator to give them a king, like all the other nations, to rule over them and lead them into battle. And so began a new era in Israel's history, marked by the establishment of the monarchy. Thus, the period of the Judges was a time of significant trials, profound lessons, and essential spiritual growth for the Israelites. They learned firsthand the importance of faithfulness to the Creator, the necessity of following His commandments, and the tragic consequences of turning away and worshiping idols. Despite their numerous errors and frequent departures from faith, they could always find their way back to the Creator, receiving His forgiveness, mercy, and help, demonstrating His boundless love and unwavering loyalty to His people. Samuel was the last and perhaps the most important of the judges, leaving an indelible mark on the history of Israel. Samuel's story begins with his mother, a devout woman named Hannah, who long suffered from infertility, considered a great disgrace in ancient society. Hannah, grieving over her childlessness, constantly prayed to the Creator, pouring out her heart and pleading for a son. She vowed that if the Creator heard her prayer and granted her a son, she would dedicate him to the Creator's service for life. The Creator, seeing her sincere faith and fervent prayer, heard her plea, and soon Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son, whom she named Samuel, meaning asked of the Creator. When Samuel was old enough, Hannah, remembering her vow, took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh and entrusted him to the care of Eli the priest, so that Samuel could serve the Creator under his guidance. Samuel grew up in the tabernacle, surrounded by holiness, and dedicated to the Creator's service from early childhood. He was a quick learner and demonstrated extraordinary devotion, obedience, and love for the Creator. One night, as Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle, the Creator called to him by name. At first, Samuel, not understanding what was happening, thought it was Eli calling him and ran to him. But when this happened several times, Eli, realizing that it was the Creator speaking to the boy, understood that Samuel was chosen for a special purpose. Eli advised Samuel that the next time he heard the voice, he should respond, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Samuel did as he was told. The Creator began to speak to Samuel and revealed His plans and intentions for the people of Israel, as well as the coming judgment upon Eli's house for its wickedness. Over the years, Samuel grew into a wise, respected, and influential leader. He traveled throughout the cities of Israel, instructing the people in the law of the Lord, urging them to repent and return to the true worship of the Creator. He judged the Israelites fairly and impartially, resolving their disputes and conflicts and teaching them to follow God's commandments. But despite all of Samuel's efforts, the people of Israel, blinded by their thirst for power and glory, began to demand a king to be like all the other nations, forgetting that the Creator was their true king and protector. Samuel was deeply disturbed and saddened by this demand because he knew that the establishment of a monarchy could lead to injustice, oppression, and departure from the true faith. However, the Creator, seeing the stubbornness and persistence of the people, told Samuel to grant their request, but to warn them of the rights of the king and the duties he would impose on the people. Samuel obeyed the Creator's voice and anointed Saul of the tribe of Benjamin as king, making him the first king of Israel, thereby ushering in a new era in the history of the chosen people. Saul, who was tall and handsome, initially showed humility and obedience to the Creator's will, winning the hearts of the people with his charm and virtue. When Samuel, the last judge and prophet, anointed him as king, everything seemed to be unfolding perfectly. foreshadowing an era of peace and prosperity. However, time revealed that the burden of kingship was not easy to bear, and Saul, unfortunately, was not always able to handle the responsibilities entrusted to him. In the early years of his reign, Saul showed obedience to the Creator and heeded Samuel's counsel, achieving victories over Israel's enemies, including the Ammonites and the Philistines. He proved himself to be a brave and courageous warrior, and the people rejoiced, witnessing his successes and deliverance from external threats. But gradually, as his power grew and his influence increased, Saul began to exhibit signs of pride, arrogance, and disobedience to God's instructions. One of Saul's first serious transgressions was offering a burnt offering to the Creator in Gilgal on his own accord, without waiting for Samuel's arrival, who was supposed to perform the ritual. Samuel, upon arriving, expressed his deep displeasure to Saul, pointing out that because of his disobedience, his kingdom would not last long, and that the Creator had already found another man who would be faithful to him. But despite this warning, Saul continued to rule, increasingly distancing himself from the Creator's will and making ever more serious mistakes. One of the most egregious violations of God's commandments was Saul's disobedience in the war with the Amalekites. The Creator commanded Saul to devote everything that belonged to the Amalekites to destruction, annihilating them all without exception, sparing no one and nothing. However, Saul, succumbing to greed and pride, disobeyed God's command, sparing Agag, the king of the Amalekites, and keeping the best sheep and oxen, justifying it by saying that he wanted to sacrifice them to the Creator. When Samuel learned of this blatant disobedience, he was deeply saddened and declared to Saul that the Creator had rejected him as king over Israel, and that the kingdom would be torn from him and given to another, more worthy person. This other person turned out to be a young shepherd from Bethlehem named David, chosen by the Creator for his gentle nature, faith, and obedience. Saul, upon learning of David's anointing as king, initially welcomed him into his palace, and David even served him, playing the harp and soothing his troubled spirit. But soon Saul's heart was filled with envy and jealousy toward David, especially after David achieved a brilliant victory over the Philistine giant Goliath, earning widespread love and admiration. Saul's envy grew into malicious hatred, and he made several attempts to kill David, seeking to eliminate his potential rival. David, betrayed and slandered, was forced to flee the palace and hide in the wilderness, saving his life. Despite Saul's persecution, David always treated him with respect, recognizing him as the Lord's anointed, and never laid a hand on him, refusing to retaliate for the harm done to him. Saul continued to rule Israel, waging wars with the surrounding nations, but his reign became increasingly unstable and chaotic, marred by his disobedience, envy, and cruelty. Finally, in a tragic battle with the Philistines on Mount Gilboa, Saul and his sons, including his beloved son Jonathan, fell at the hands of the enemies, ending the sad story of Saul's reign, which began with such great hopes and promises, but ended tragically due to his disobedience and pride. Saul's death marked the tragic end of the first chapter in the history of the Israelite monarchy, teaching descendants an important lesson about how easily one can lose the Creator's favor by succumbing to pride and turning away from his commandments. Saul, who possessed all the qualities needed for successful rule, missed his chance, falling victim to disobedience and envy, and his sad fate became a warning for future generations of kings. Now Israel awaited the ascent of a new ruler, David, a humble shepherd chosen by the Creator himself and destined to become one of the greatest kings in Israel's history. Anointed king by the prophet Samuel in his youth, David was known for his gentle spirit, pure heart, and unwavering faith in the Creator. He demonstrated incredible courage and bravery, most notably in his famous battle against the Philistine giant, Goliath, who challenged the entire Israelite army. The story of David and Goliath began when the Philistines, Israel's age-old enemies, once again gathered their forces to wage war against the Israelites. They presented their best warrior, a giant named Goliath, clad in heavy armor and armed with a massive spear and sword. Every day, Goliath would stride onto the battlefield and contemptuously challenge the Israelites, mocking them and demanding that someone come out to fight him and decide the outcome of the war. However, none of Saul's warriors, gripped by fear of Goliath's immense strength, dared to accept his challenge. One day, David, sent by his father to bring food to his older brothers in the Israelite army, found himself on the battlefield. He was astonished to see the fear and hesitation of the Israelite soldiers and outraged by Goliath's audacity in blaspheming the Creator and his people. Driven by faith and righteous anger, David declared that he was ready to accept Goliath's challenge and fight him. Saul, upon hearing this, initially did not believe that a young shepherd could defeat a mighty warrior. But seeing David's determination and confidence, he allowed him to try his luck. David, rejecting Saul's heavy armor, which did not fit him, took only his staff, a sling, and 5 smooth stones found in a stream. Approaching Goliath, David declared that he came against him not with weapons, but in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom Goliath had dared to defy me. As Goliath advanced on David to crush him, David, quickly taking a stone from his bag, placed it in his sling and hurled it with such force and accuracy that the stone struck Goliath directly in the forehead, piercing his skull. Goliath, unconscious, collapsed to the ground, and David, running to him, cut off his head with his own sword, achieving a triumphant victory. This incredible victory brought David fame and widespread recognition, but at the same time aroused the envy and hatred of King Saul, who saw the young hero as a threat to his power. From that moment on, David's life became a series of persecutions and wanderings, as Saul, consumed by jealousy, sought to eliminate his rival at any cost. When Saul died in battle against the Philistines on Mount Gilboa, the Israelite people, exhausted by the long and bloody war, recognized David as their king, seeing in him a hope for peace and prosperity. Initially, David ruled only in Hebron, where he was anointed king over the tribe of Judah. But after the death of Ishbosheth, the last representative of the house of Saul, the elders of all the tribes of Israel came to David in Hebron and recognized him as king over all of Israel, ending the period of internal strife and uniting the nation. David's reign over all of Israel marked the dawn of a new era in the history of a people striving for unity and prosperity. Once established on the throne, David moved the capital to Jerusalem, a city situated on the border between the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, thereby symbolizing the unity of the entire nation. He also brought the Ark of the Covenant, Israel's most sacred relic, to Jerusalem, making the city the country's spiritual center. David's reign was marked by numerous victories over Israel's enemies, who had threatened its security for many years. He expanded the borders of his kingdom, created a strong and well-trained army, and established fair laws, ensuring peace and prosperity for his subjects. David was known not only as a wise ruler and brave warrior, but also as a man of deep faith and spirituality. He wrote numerous psalms, expressing in them his love for the Creator, his joys and sorrows, his hopes and fears, his regrets and pleas for forgiveness. David's psalms, filled with profound meaning and beauty, have become a source of comfort and inspiration for generations of believers. However, David's life was not without its shadows. He committed serious sins, including adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and the subsequent murder of Uriah to conceal his sin. The Creator, angered by these crimes, punished David, and his family experienced many misfortunes and tragedies, including the rebellion of his son Absalom and the death of other children. However, despite his mistakes and failures, David always sincerely repented of his sins and turned to the Creator with a plea for forgiveness, demonstrating his faith and humility. David ruled Israel for 40 years, and his reign went down in history as the golden age of the kingdom of Israel, a time of peace, prosperity, justice, and spiritual uplift. On his deathbed, surrounded by glory and honor, David passed the reins of government to his son Solomon, instructing him to continue his work and build a magnificent temple in Jerusalem dedicated to the Creator. David's life, with all its ups and downs, victories and defeats, became a vivid example of sincere faith, an unwavering commitment to righteousness, and repentance for committed sins, demonstrating the power of God's grace and forgiveness even for those who have made serious mistakes. Solomon, the son of David and Bathsheba, inherited the royal throne of Israel after his father's death. As a young and inexperienced ruler, he was aware of the immense responsibility placed upon him and understood that he needed wisdom and discernment to successfully govern the nation. One night, the Creator appeared to Solomon in a dream and offered to grant him any wish. Solomon, instead of asking for wealth, glory, or longevity, asked the Creator for wisdom and understanding to judge the people fairly and govern the country according to his will. The Creator, pleased with Solomon's humble and wise request, fulfilled his wish and granted him not only great wisdom, but also wealth and glory exceeding all his expectations, and promised him a long and prosperous life if he remained faithful to him and kept his commandments. The fame of Solomon's wisdom quickly spread throughout the land, and people from different countries, admiring his justice and insight, came to Jerusalem to hear his wise words, receive advice, and see the splendor of his kingdom. One of Solomon's greatest achievements was the construction of a magnificent temple in Jerusalem, which David had dreamed of building, but the Creator had destined for his son to accomplish. Solomon, recognizing the importance of this project, undertook the work with immense enthusiasm and dedication. He entered into a mutually beneficial alliance with Hiram, the king of Tyre, who pledged to supply the cedar and cypress trees needed for the temple's construction, as well as experienced craftsmen and artisans. Thousands of workers toiled day and night under the guidance of talented architects and craftsmen, turning Solomon's vision into reality. The construction of the temple, begun in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, continued for 7 years, and when it was completed, the temple was a true wonder of the world, astonishing in its beauty and grandeur. The interior walls of the temple were covered in pure gold, decorated with carved images of cherubim and palm trees, and the doors were made of olive wood and adorned with carvings in gold. At the very heart of the temple was the Holy of Holies, the place where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, a symbol of the Creator's presence among his people. Solomon summoned all the Israelites to a grand celebration of the temple's dedication, which lasted for 7 days. During the solemn ceremony, Solomon, standing before the altar, offered a prayer to the Creator, asking him to bless the temple and the people of Israel and to make this place a house of prayer for all nations. The Creator, hearing Solomon's prayer, revealed his glory, filling the temple with a cloud, so that the priests could not continue their service, bearing witness to his presence and favor. In addition to the temple, Solomon built many other impressive buildings and fortifications, including his luxurious palace, a testament to the wealth and prosperity of his kingdom. He also actively developed trade, concluding profitable agreements with neighboring countries, which contributed to the influx of wealth into Israel and strengthened its political influence. Solomon became famous not only as a great builder and wise ruler, but also as a fair judge, to whom people turned for the resolution of the most complex disputes and conflicts. One day, 2 women came to Solomon, arguing about who was the mother of a living baby. Both women claimed that the child belonged to them, and there was no evidence to establish the truth. Solomon, in order to reveal the true mother, proposed to cut the child in half and give half to each woman. One of the women, agreeing to this cruel proposal, showed indifference to the child's fate, while the other, consumed by maternal love, begged Solomon to give the child to the other woman, just so he would live. Solomon, seeing her sincere love and self-sacrifice, immediately understood who the real mother was, and gave her the child and ordered the false woman to be punished. However, despite all his achievements and wisdom, Solomon made serious mistakes that had tragic consequences for his kingdom. He took many wives from different nations, contrary to God's prohibition, and allowed them to bring their gods and idols into Israel. Under the influence of his wives, Solomon gradually began to deviate from the true faith and worship foreign gods, building shrines for them and participating in their pagan rituals. The Creator, angered by this apostasy, warned Solomon that for his unfaithfulness and idolatry, his kingdom would be divided after his death, and a large part of it would be torn away from his heir. Solomon ruled Israel for 40 years, and his reign was a time of great prosperity, peace, and power, but also a sad lesson about the importance of faithfulness to the Creator and the disastrous consequences of apostasy and idolatry. After Solomon's passing, his kingdom, which had reached the zenith of its power and prosperity, stood on the precipice of great changes, foretold by the Creator as punishment for his apostasy and worship of foreign gods. Solomon was undoubtedly a wise and insightful ruler who left an indelible mark on the history of Israel. But in the final years of his reign, discontent began to brew among the people, fueled by exorbitant taxes and forced labor on massive construction projects that drained the treasury and exhausted the strength of his subjects. Once upon a time, in a distant and wealthy land known as Sheba, there reigned a wise and learned queen, renowned for her fairness, curiosity, and thirst for knowledge. She had heard much about the extraordinary wisdom, immense riches, and just rule of the great King Solomon of Israel, a ruler whose fame resounded throughout the world. Driven by curiosity and a desire to see for herself the truth of these rumors, the Queen of Sheba resolved to embark on a long and perilous journey to Jerusalem to meet with Solomon and test his wisdom. She did not travel alone, but assembled a vast and opulent caravan of camels laden with gold, precious stones, incense, spices, and other rare treasures worthy of a king. These generous gifts were intended for Solomon to express her deep respect, admiration, and gratitude for his willingness to receive her in his kingdom. When the Queen of Sheba, having completed her long and arduous journey, arrived in Jerusalem, she was greeted with great honor and bestowed with royal accolades befitting her high station. Solomon personally welcomed her and invited her into his magnificent palace, which astonished with its splendor and luxury. As the Queen of Sheba entered the palace, she was overwhelmed by the magnificence she beheld. The palace seemed to shimmer with gold and jewels, and the walls and ceilings were covered with intricate carvings and exquisite paintings, testaments to the high skill of Israelite artisans. But what struck her most was not the outward opulence, but the boundless wisdom of Solomon, manifest in every word and deed. Desiring to test his intellect, the Queen of Sheba posed to Solomon a multitude of complex questions concerning various fields of knowledge, from politics and economics to philosophy and theology. To her great surprise, Solomon answered all her questions with ease, precision, and profound understanding. He spoke of science, nature, human relationships, and even the mysteries of the universe, astonishing her with his erudition and comprehensive knowledge. The Queen of Sheba also attentively observed how Solomon governed his kingdom. She saw how wisely he resolved disputes among his subjects, judged fairly, and cared for the welfare of his people. She was struck not only by his wisdom, but also by his ability to efficiently manage the resources and economy of the country, ensuring prosperity and well-being for all the inhabitants of Israel. After spending several days in Jerusalem and interacting with Solomon personally, the Queen of Sheba, captivated by his greatness and wisdom, candidly admitted that everything she had heard about him was true and had even surpassed all her expectations. She said, "The reports I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom are true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half had been told to me. In wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard. Blessed are your people, and blessed are these servants of yours who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom." Filled with admiration and gratitude, the Queen of Sheba presented Solomon with all the rich gifts she had brought with him, expressing her respect and reverence. In return, Solomon, generous and magnanimous, bestowed upon the Queen of Sheba a multitude of valuable gifts, which she took with her back to her homeland, testifying to his generosity and hospitality. When the Queen of Sheba returned to her country, she brought with her not only material riches, but also invaluable lessons in wisdom and governance that she had learned from Solomon, inspiring her to rule her people justly and wisely. Her meeting with the great king of Israel became a legend, passed down from generation to generation, glorifying Solomon's wisdom and the greatness of his kingdom. This story of the Queen of Sheba and Solomon is a vivid example of the importance of striving for wisdom, knowledge, and justice. For it is these qualities that make a ruler great and capable of bringing prosperity and well-being to his people, leaving an indelible mark on history. After Solomon's death, his kingdom stood on the precipice of great changes, foreshadowing division and turmoil. Although Solomon was a wise and insightful ruler, in the last years of his reign, the people began to show dissatisfaction due to high taxes and hard labor on government construction projects, which weakened the economy and shook confidence in the royal authority. Upon Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam inherited his throne, who unfortunately possessed neither the wisdom, nor the experience, nor the foresight of his illustrious father. Upon ascending the royal throne, Rehoboam faced a serious challenge. The people of Israel, especially the northern tribes, weary of heavy taxes and forced labor, came to him with a petition to lighten their burden, hoping that the new king would show mercy and justice. Rehoboam, realizing the importance of this moment, decided to consult with his advisors, who were divided into two camps: experienced elders who had served under his father Solomon and young advisors, his peers who had grown up with him. The senior advisors, possessing wisdom and experience, suggested that Rehoboam show prudence and grant the people's request by reducing taxes and easing the burden of labor. They argued that this would help win the trust and love of the people, thereby strengthening his power and ensuring stability in the kingdom. However, the young advisors, arrogant and inexperienced, advised Rehoboam to show firmness and cruelty, refusing concessions and demonstrating his strength and steadfastness. They believed that this would force the people to fear and obey him, not allowing anyone to doubt his power and authority. Rehoboam, unfortunately, disregarded the wise advice of the elders and, succumbing to the influence of the young advisors, answered the people harshly and arrogantly, declaring, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will increase your yoke. My father punished you with whips, but I will punish you with scorpions." This rash and cruel response sparked a wave of outrage and resentment among the Israelites, especially among the northern tribes, who felt betrayed and insulted. As a result, the 10 northern tribes of Israel, disillusioned with Rehoboam and his rule, refused to recognize him as their king and rebelled against his authority. They chose as their leader Jeroboam, a former servant of Solomon, a talented and ambitious man who had previously fled to Egypt, fearing persecution by Solomon. Thus occurred the tragic division of the kingdom of Israel into two warring parts: the northern kingdom of Israel, consisting of 10 tribes, with its capital in Samaria, and the southern kingdom of Judah, consisting of 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, with its capital in Jerusalem. Jeroboam, becoming king of Israel, understood that in order to strengthen his power and prevent the people from returning to Rehoboam, he needed to create an alternative center of worship, distinct from the temple in Jerusalem. Fearing that regular pilgrimages to Jerusalem to worship at the temple might reignite loyalty to the house of David in the hearts of the people, Jeroboam decided to set up 2 golden calves, one in Bethel and the other in Dan, 2 important cities in the northern kingdom, and declared them to be the gods who brought Israel out of the land of Egypt. Jeroboam also established his own priesthood, not affiliated with the Levites, and established new holidays, different from those observed in Judah. This act became a great sin and led to mass idolatry among the people, turning them away from the true Creator. A fierce feud began between the 2 kingdoms, Israel and Judah, which continued for many years, periodically escalating into armed conflicts. This internecine strife led to much suffering and disaster for both peoples, weakening their forces and making them vulnerable to external enemies. The division of the kingdom became a tragic lesson in the history of Israel, showing how important wisdom, justice, mercy, and obedience to the Creator are in governing a people. The mistakes, pride, and cruelty of Rehoboam led to the split of the great kingdom built by David and Solomon, weakening the people and leading to long years of conflict and disaster, demonstrating the tragic consequences of neglecting divine principles of governance. After the tragic division of the United Kingdom of Israel into 2 warring states, Israel and Judah, the history of these 2 kingdoms unfolded along different paths, full of ups and downs, periods of faithfulness to the Creator, and tragic instances of apostasy from his commandments. In Israel, the northern kingdom, the first king was Jeroboam, who proclaimed himself ruler of the 10 tribes that had separated from Judah. Fearing that his subjects would continue to go to the temple in Jerusalem to worship the Creator, thereby undermining his authority, Jeroboam took a radical step, establishing alternative centers of worship in Bethel and Dan, setting up golden calves there, and declaring them to be the gods who brought Israel out of the land of Egypt. This act, violating the first and foremost commandment of the Decalogue, marked the beginning of the tragic history of idolatry in the northern kingdom, which haunted it throughout its history. Each successive king of Israel, unfortunately, followed the sinful example of Jeroboam, continuing to worship idols, turning away from the Creator, and plunging his people into spiritual darkness. One of the most infamous kings of Israel was Ahab, who reigned in the 9th century before the Common Era. He married Jezebel, the daughter of the king of Sidon, a Phoenician princess who was a zealous worshiper of Baal, the Canaanite god of fertility. Jezebel, upon arriving in Israel, brought with her the cult of Baal and Ashtoreth worship and, with the help of Ahab, began to actively spread it throughout the kingdom, erecting shrines, setting up altars, and eradicating the worship of the Creator. By persecuting the prophets of the Creator and killing those faithful to him, Ahab and Jezebel plunged Israel into deep spiritual apostasy, incurring the wrath of the Creator and foreshadowing the tragic end of the northern kingdom. Yet in this bleak period, as the northern kingdom plunged into an abyss of spiritual darkness, the Creator did not abandon his people without hope, raising up the prophet Elijah, a mighty and zealous champion for truth. Elijah, driven by the fire of God, boldly confronted wicked rulers and false prophets, calling the Israelites to repentance and a return to the Creator. He challenged the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, proposing a contest to prove who was the true God. The prophets of Baal, despite all their efforts and hours of supplication, could not summon their gods to send fire upon the altar. Then Elijah, offering a brief prayer to the Creator, witnessed an incredible miracle. The fire of God descended from the heavens, instantly consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water, filling the hearts of the people with fear and reverence. Seeing the greatness and power of the Creator, the people cried out, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" However, this repentance proved short-lived, and soon after Elijah's departure, Israel once again returned to its idols. In Judah, the southern kingdom, the situation remained somewhat more stable, although periods of apostasy and revival of faith were also observed there. Some kings of Judah, mindful of the covenant with the Creator, remained faithful to His commandments and strived to implement pious reforms. Among these kings, Hezekiah, who reigned in the 8th century before Common Era, stood out in particular. Hezekiah, driven by zeal for the Creator, carried out extensive religious reforms, destroying idols, demolishing pagan altars, and restoring worship of the Creator in the temple in Jerusalem. Hezekiah also became famous for his sincere prayer during a serious illness, in response to which the Creator granted him a miraculous healing and extended his life by 15 years. Furthermore, Hezekiah showed courage and resilience during the attack of the mighty Assyrian army on Judah, trusting in the help of the Creator and imploring Him to protect Jerusalem. And the Creator demonstrated His power, miraculously saving the city from capture. Another outstanding king of Judah was Josiah, who reigned in the 7th century before Common Era. During the repair of the Jerusalem temple, the Book of the Law, containing the commandments of the Creator that the people had long forgotten, was accidentally discovered. Josiah, upon reading the book and realizing how far his people had strayed from the will of the Creator, was deeply shocked and contrite. Filled with zeal for the Creator, Josiah initiated sweeping religious reforms, destroying idols, cleansing the temple of pagan trappings, and restoring true worship of the Creator. During his reign, Passover was celebrated with such solemnity and magnificence as had not been celebrated since the days of the judges, reviving in the people the memory of God's deliverance from Egyptian bondage. However, unfortunately, not all the kings of Judah were faithful to the Creator. Some of them, such as Manasseh, who reigned before Josiah, led the people into even greater idolatry and sin, committing heinous crimes against the will of the Creator. Manasseh went so far as to offer his own sons as sacrifices to idols, defiling the Holy Land of Judah. These outrageous sins led the Creator, who had long endured the wickedness of His people, to decide to punish Judah as He had previously punished Israel, foretelling the tragic end of the southern kingdom. In the end, despite periods of faithfulness and revival of faith, both kingdoms, both Israel and Judah, could not refrain from apostasy and did not fulfill the covenant made with the Creator. As a result, Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, its people taken into captivity and scattered across various lands, disappearing from history. Judah, despite its religious reforms, also did not escape God's judgment and was conquered by the Babylonians. The Jerusalem temple was destroyed, and the people were taken into captivity in Babylon. These tragic events served as a harsh reminder that straying from God's paths leads to destruction, misfortune, and the loss of blessings. But even during these trials, the Creator continued to love His people and sent prophets to call them to repentance, a return to faithfulness, in hope for future restoration. In ancient Israel and Judah, prophets played a key and indispensable role, serving as messengers of the Creator, entrusted with conveying His will and revelations to the people and kings, rebuking them for their sins, calling them to repentance, and predicting the future, warning of impending disasters and comforting them with hope for salvation. Among the multitude of prophets who served the Creator at various times, two figures stand out particularly brightly: Elijah and Elisha, two great men who performed many miracles and exerted a tremendous influence on the spiritual and political life of Israel. Elijah, who lived in the 9th century before Common Era, was one of the most powerful and courageous prophets, zealously defending faith in the Creator and uncompromisingly fighting against idolatry. He lived in Israel during the reign of King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, ardent supporters of the Baal cult who sought to eradicate worship of the Creator and impose pagan rites throughout the country. Elijah, filled with the fire of God, boldly rebuked Ahab and Jezebel for their wickedness, calling them to return to the Creator and cease the persecution of his prophets. He rebuked the people of Israel for their apostasy from the Creator, their worship of pagan idols, their lies, violence, and injustice, calling them to repentance and a return to the observance of the law. On one occasion, Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, offering them a contest to prove which God was the true one. They were to call upon their gods to send fire from heaven and burn the sacrifice placed on the altar. The prophets of Baal prayed and shouted all day, performing ritual dances and self-mutilation, but their God did not answer them, and no fire descended upon the altar. When it was Elijah's turn, he first rebuilt the altar of the Creator that had been destroyed by the pagans, then placed wood and an ox upon it, and to make the task even more difficult, ordered the sacrifice to be doused with water 3 times, filling the trench around the altar. Then Elijah, addressing the Creator with a simple and sincere prayer, asked him to reveal his power and show the people that he is the true God of Israel. At that very moment, fire descended from the heavens, instantly consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water, causing amazement and reverent awe in all those gathered. Seeing this miracle, the people fell on their faces and exclaimed, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." After this, Elijah continued his prophetic ministry, performing many miracles and foretelling future events. He predicted a drought that lasted 3.5 years, punishing Israel for its apostasy. Then, when the people repented, Elijah prayed to the Creator for rain to fall again upon the land, and the heavens opened, pouring abundant streams of water upon the parched earth. But Elijah was not only a fearless opponent of kings and a fighter against idolatry, but also showed concern for the poor, widows, and orphans, helping them in their needs and comforting them in their sorrows. For example, he miraculously helped a poor widow from Zarephath in Sidon, who had neither food nor hope of survival. Elijah increased the supply of flour and oil in her house, and these supplies miraculously did not run out until the very end of the drought, providing sustenance for her and her son. Elisha, who lived in the 9th century before Common Era, was a faithful disciple and devoted successor of Elijah, inheriting from him the prophetic gift and continuing his ministry. When the time came, the Creator took Elijah in a fiery whirlwind into the heavens, sending a chariot of fire with horses of fire after him. And Elisha, who witnessed this miraculous event, received from him the mantle, outer garment, symbolizing the prophetic gift, and received a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Elisha, endowed with the power of the Creator, performed many miracles, confirming his divine mission and strengthening the faith of the people. He parted the waters of the Jordan River to cross on dry ground, just as Elijah had done, and healed the spring in Jericho, making its water drinkable, delivering the inhabitants of the city from disease and suffering. One of the most famous miracles performed by Elisha was the resurrection of the son of a wealthy woman from Shunem, who had shown him hospitality and care. Elisha often traveled throughout the country, instructing the people in the true faith and performing good deeds. And one pious woman from Shunem, seeing his holy life and service to the Creator, offered him to stay in her house, arranging a special room for him. In gratitude for her hospitality, Elisha predicted that she would give birth to a son, even though she was barren and already advanced in age. A year later, Elisha's prediction came true, and the woman gave birth to a son. However, after a few years, the boy suddenly died, and the woman, overcome with grief and despair, hastened to Elisha, begging him for help. Elisha, moved by compassion, came to her house and resurrected the boy, bringing him back to life, comforting the heart of the mother and revealing the power of the Creator. Elisha also performed the miracle of healing the Syrian general Naaman from leprosy, a terrible disease considered incurable. Naaman, having learned of the miraculous power of Elisha, came to him in hopes of healing, bringing with him rich gifts. However, Elisha, instead of accepting the gifts, sent him to dip in the Jordan River 7 times, without saying a word to him. Naaman, proud and arrogant, was initially disappointed by such a simple and, as it seemed to him, meaningless solution, believing that the prophet should perform some special rites over him and call upon his God. But his servants persuaded him to obey the words of the prophet, and when he, overcoming his pride, dipped into the Jordan 7 times, his body was miraculously cleansed of leprosy, and he became healthy as before. After being healed, Naaman returned to Elisha, acknowledging the power of the Creator of Israel and promising to worship only him. Prophets such as Elijah and Elisha were not only miracle workers and predictors of the future, but also moral and spiritual leaders of the people, playing an important role in shaping their values and beliefs. They called the people to repent of their sins, return to the Creator, and observe His commandments, rebuking wickedness and injustice in society. Often their words sounded like stern warnings of impending disasters that would befall the people if they did not change their ways and return to the Creator. They were the voice of conscience, justice, and truth, denouncing evil and calling for good even in the most difficult and dark times. Beyond Elijah and Elisha, numerous other prophets also played significant roles in the history of Israel and Judah, conveying the Creator's messages of justice, mercy, love, and faithfulness to the people. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, Hosea, and other prophets who left behind their prophetic books called the people to repentance, warned against idolatry, denounced social injustice, and comforted them with hope for future salvation. They helped the people understand the Creator's will, maintain faith and hope even in the most difficult times, and guided them on the path to righteousness and eternal life. The prophets, chosen individuals of the Creator, who stood between Him and His people, guiding and instructing them on the right path, serve as examples of faithfulness, courage, and devotion to God's will. Their lives, words, and messages, recorded in the Holy Scriptures, continue to inspire, teach, and guide us today, reminding us of eternal values and the necessity of following the Creator's ways. When Judah was under the rule of King Jehoiakim, the country began to experience serious difficulties, marking the tragic end of its independence. Babylon, a mighty empire under the leadership of King Nebuchadnezzar, was rapidly expanding its territories, posing a serious threat to neighboring states, including Judah. Jehoiakim, in an attempt to resist Babylonian expansion, entered into an alliance with Egypt, hoping for its military assistance. However, this decision proved to be a mistake and only led to even greater problems. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, angered by Jehoiakim's disobedience, marched his army on Jerusalem, besieging the city and forcing it to capitulate. After capturing Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar took King Jehoiakim captive to Babylon, along with a portion of the nobility, warriors, and craftsmen, and also seized treasures from the Lord's temple, desecrating the holy place. Nebuchadnezzar placed a new king, Jehoiachin, Jehoiakim's son, on the throne of Judah, hoping that he would be more obedient and loyal to Babylon. However, Jehoiachin's reign was short-lived, lasting only 3 months. Soon, Nebuchadnezzar, suspecting Jehoiachin of preparing for a rebellion, approached Jerusalem again with an army, this time with the intention of completely subjugating the city and putting an end to Judah's independence. Jehoiachin, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, voluntarily surrendered to the Babylonians, hoping to save the city from destruction. Nebuchadnezzar deposed Jehoiachin and took him to Babylon, along with most of the population, including the nobility, warriors, craftsmen, and prophets, leaving Jerusalem practically deserted. In Jehoiachin's place, Nebuchadnezzar appointed Zedekiah, Jehoiachin's uncle, hoping that he would be more submissive and loyal to Babylon. However, Zedekiah, a weak and indecisive ruler, failed to resist the influence of the patriotically minded nobility and rebelled against Babylon, making a fatal mistake that led Judah to its final fall and destruction. In 588 BC, the Babylonian army besieged Jerusalem once again, seeking to suppress the rebellion and punish the disobedient Jews. The siege lasted for 2 long years, and the inhabitants of the city, surrounded on all sides by enemies, suffered from famine, disease, and the horrors of war. In 586 BC, Babylonian troops broke through the city walls and stormed into Jerusalem, committing a brutal massacre and pillage. Nebuchadnezzar, angered by the stubbornness and disobedience of the Jews, ordered the city to be razed to the ground, wiping it off the face of the earth. The Lord's temple, the center of Jewish spiritual life, was burned and looted, and its treasures were taken to Babylon. Homes, palaces, and public buildings were also destroyed, and the city walls were torn down, leaving Jerusalem in ruins, symbolizing the collapse of the Judean kingdom. Most of the population was killed, and the survivors were taken into captivity in Babylon, putting an end to the existence of the Judean kingdom and beginning the period of Babylonian exile. Everything that once symbolized the greatness, strength, and glory of Jerusalem was ruthlessly destroyed and desecrated, turning the prosperous city into a heap of smoldering ruins, bearing witness to the Creator's anger and the tragic consequences of disobedience. Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, tried to escape from the doomed city, but he was captured by Babylonian warriors and brought to Nebuchadnezzar to face a harsh judgment. Nebuchadnezzar, angered by his betrayal and disobedience, subjected Zedekiah to a terrible punishment. Zedekiah's sons were killed before his very eyes, depriving him of hope for the continuation of the royal line. And then he himself was blinded, preventing him from seeing the light and beauty of the world. After that, Zedekiah was bound in chains and sent into captivity in Babylon, where he spent the rest of his life in a dungeon, paying for his mistakes and sins. The surviving population of Judah was also taken into captivity in Babylon, deprived of their land, freedom, and customary way of life. Only a small portion of poor and infirm people were left in Judah to cultivate vineyards and till the land, turning the once flourishing region into a desert. Thus began the Babylonian captivity, a period in the history of Israel when most of the Jewish people were forced to live far from their homeland in a foreign and hostile land. They were settled in various regions of Babylonia, where they had to adapt to a new life, preserving their faith, culture, and traditions in a foreign pagan environment. This period, which lasted about 70 years, became a time of severe trials, deep reflection, and spiritual reevaluation for the people of Israel, who had experienced the collapse of their statehood, the destruction of the temple, and the loss of their national identity. Despite the harsh conditions of captivity, the Jews did not lose hope of returning to their native land. Faithful prophets, such as Jeremiah and Ezekiel, continued to inspire the people with their prophecies, promising that the Creator would not forget them and that after the end of the period of punishment, they would be returned to their land and restore their country. These promises, passed down from generation to generation, sustained the spirit of the people, helped them survive the difficult years of captivity, and maintain faith in future salvation. The Babylonian captivity became a turning point in the history of Israel, radically changing their lives, values, and beliefs. It reminded the people of the importance of faithfulness to the Creator, the necessity of observing His commandments, and the tragic consequences of apostasy and idolatry. Through the suffering and trials experienced in captivity, the Jews strengthened their faith, preserved their national identity, and prepared for the day when they could return to their homeland and revive their land and their spiritual heritage. When Judah fell under the onslaught of the Babylonian Empire and found itself in the Babylonian captivity, the people of Israel, deprived of their freedom, land, and temple, found themselves in a desperate situation that threatened their spiritual survival. During this tragic period, the prophets sent by the Creator played a key role in maintaining faith, hope, and national identity among the Israelites, strengthening their spirit and guiding them on the path to repentance and restoration. Jeremiah, also known as the weeping prophet because of his deep sorrow for the sins and impending disasters of his people, remained in Judah after most of the population was taken into captivity in Babylon. He foresaw the fall of Jerusalem and for many years tried to warn the kings and the people of the inevitability of God's punishment if they did not turn to the Creator and abandon their sinful ways. Jeremiah wrote letters to the captives in Babylon, urging them to accept their captivity, accept their fate, and live in Babylon, building houses, planting gardens, and praying for the well-being of the city to which they had been taken. He explained that this was part of God's plan and that resisting the Babylonian authorities would only exacerbate their suffering. Jeremiah promised that the Creator would not forget His people and that after the expiration of 70 years they would be returned to their native land and restore their country. His messages, full of pain, sorrow, and warnings, but also hope, faith, and confidence in God's mercy, helped the captives preserve their faith and hope for the future. Ezekiel, who was in captivity in Babylon, along with other exiles, was also called by the Creator to prophetic ministry. He became a prophet while already in captivity, where the Creator revealed to him visions filled with symbolism and power, which helped him convey God's message to the people. One of Ezekiel's most famous visions was a vision of a field full of dry bones, which, at the prophet's command, miraculously came to life, forming a huge army, symbolizing the future revival of Israel. Ezekiel also predicted the final fall of Jerusalem in order to sober the captives and dissuade them from false hopes of early liberation. However, unlike Jeremiah, who focused on repentance and humility, Ezekiel's messages were more filled with hope for restoration, redemption, and spiritual renewal of the people, promising them a new heart and a new spirit that would help them live in accordance with the Creator's will. Daniel, another prominent prophet who lived during the Babylonian captivity, was taken captive at a young age along with other representatives of the Judean nobility. Thanks to his intelligence, insight, and unwavering loyalty to the Creator, he quickly rose to high positions in the court of the Babylonian and then Persian kings, enjoying their respect and trust. Daniel remained true to his faith and his principles, even when it put his life at risk. For example, he refused to stop praying to the Creator, despite the decree of King Darius, which prohibited praying to any gods other than himself. And for this, he was thrown into a den of lions. However, the Creator miraculously saved Daniel from death, shutting the mouths of the lions, thereby strengthening the faith of many and revealing his power and protection to those faithful to him. Daniel also became famous for his prophetic gifts, interpreting the dreams of Babylonian kings and predicting future events that testified to the immutability of God's plan and the Creator's sovereign power over nations and kingdoms. Daniel remained true to his faith and traditions, even while far from home, not defiling himself with pagan food and maintaining his connection with the Creator through prayer and meditation on Holy Scripture. Through the example and prophetic messages of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, the people of Israel, while in Babylonian captivity, were able to preserve their faith, hope, and national identity, preparing for the fulfillment of God's promise of returning to their native land. These prophets taught that even in the most difficult circumstances, the Creator remains with His people, that their sufferings would not be eternal, and that faithfulness to Him would lead to restoration and blessing. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, through their lives, prophetic gift, and inspiring messages, laid a solid foundation for preserving faith and hope in the hearts of the captive Israelites, preparing them for the coming return, the restoration of their people, and the recreation of their spiritual heritage. After long and difficult years spent in Babylonian captivity, the Creator, faithful to His promise, had compassion on His people and fulfilled His word by returning them to their homeland. This event, marking the end of the period of exile and the beginning of a new era in the history of Israel, became a vivid testimony of God's faithfulness, mercy, and power, transforming sorrow into joy and despair into hope. It all began when the Persian king Cyrus the Great, having conquered mighty Babylon, became the ruler of a vast empire stretching from India to Egypt. Cyrus, a wise, just, and far-sighted ruler, pursued a policy of religious tolerance and respected the culture and traditions of the conquered peoples. Inspired by the Creator, Cyrus issued a decree allowing captive peoples, including the Israelites, to return to their native lands and rebuild their ruined cities and temples. In 538 years before the Common Era, Cyrus issued the famous decree, which went down in history as the Edict of Cyrus, allowing the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the Creator's temple. This decree, which became an act of mercy and justice, put an end to the Babylonian captivity and opened a new page in the history of Israel. The first group of returning exiles, led by Zerubbabel, a descendant of the royal line of David, and Joshua the high priest, set out for Jerusalem, filled with joy, hope, and enthusiasm. Having overcome a long and difficult journey, they reached their native land, which appeared before them in a sad state. Jerusalem lay in ruins, the temple was destroyed, and the surrounding area was abandoned and devastated. However, this did not shake their faith and determination to rebuild their city and the Creator's house. Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest, despite numerous difficulties and resistance from hostile neighboring peoples, set about rebuilding the temple, seeking to revive the spiritual life of Israel and restore worship to the Creator. They laid the foundation of the new temple, offering sacrifices and raising prayers to the Creator, and gradually, step by step, continued construction, overcoming obstacles, and strengthening their faith. Another important figure in the history of the return from captivity was Ezra, a pious priest and scribe who was well-versed in the Creator's law. Ezra, who arrived in Jerusalem with another group of returnees, brought with him scrolls of the law and dedicated his life to restoring the spiritual life of the people. He taught the people the law of God, explaining its meaning and importance, revived religious rites, restored celebrations, and sought to return the people to observing the Creator's commandments, rebuking them for their sins and calling them to repentance. Ezra, gathering the people in Jerusalem, read them the law of God, and the people, realizing their sins and transgressions, wept bitterly, repenting of their ungodliness. Later, Nehemiah, the cupbearer of the Persian king Artaxerxes, learning of the plight of the Israelites living in Jerusalem and the ruined city walls, appealed to the king to allow him to return to Jerusalem and help his people. Artaxerxes, touched by his concern and devotion, not only gave Nehemiah permission to return, but also provided him with the necessary resources, letters to local authorities, and a military detachment to ensure his safety. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he saw the ruined city walls, gaping breaches in the gates, and the people living in constant fear of their enemies. Nehemiah, inspired by the Creator, organized the work of restoring the walls and gates of the city, encouraging the people by his example and calling them to unity and perseverance. Despite numerous threats, mockery, and attacks from enemies surrounding Jerusalem, the people, under the leadership of Nehemiah, worked with extraordinary dedication and selflessness, believing in God's help and striving to restore the protection of their city. The walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt in just 52 days, which became a testament to their faith, perseverance, and God's support. Nehemiah also carried out important social and economic reforms aimed at strengthening social justice, protecting the poor and oppressed, and eradicating corruption and abuse of power. He returned the people to observing the Sabbath and other commandments, and also fought against usury and exploitation, striving to create a just and prosperous society based on the principles of the Creator's law. The return from Babylonian captivity and the restoration of Jerusalem became a symbol of hope, rebirth, and the Creator's mercy for the people of Israel. Despite all the difficulties, hardships, and trials that befell them, they showed that with faith in the Creator, unity, perseverance, and devotion, it is possible to overcome any obstacles, restore what has been destroyed, and build a new future based on the principles of righteousness and justice. Their story continues to inspire generations of believers, reminding them of the importance of faith, hope, repentance, unity, and perseverance in difficult times, and that the Creator is faithful to His promises and is always ready to extend a helping hand to those who seek Him with a sincere heart.